Welcome. I'm Magnus, and I bring you horror stories to help you relax, or maybe to keep you up at night. Tell us where you're from. Are there spooky forests nearby? If you're a fan of scary stories, subscribe and drop a like. Get cozy, and let's begin. My name's Daniel Thomas Anderson, and I'm 28 years old. I live in a modest apartment in Portland, where I work as a freelance graphic designer. Life had been pretty mundane until that fateful camping trip to Olympic National Park. I still get chills thinking about it, like someone's walking over my grave. I'd been feeling burnout from too many back-to-back projects, so when my college buddy Eric suggested a weekend getaway, I jumped at the chance. Eric Winters had always been the adventurous type, tall, bearded, with this infectious laugh that could lighten any mood. We'd been close since freshman year, though we drifted apart after graduation. Accompanying us would be his girlfriend Melissa Chun, a quiet wildlife photographer I'd only met twice before, and her brother Jason, who I'd never met but had heard was an experienced hiker. The plan was simple: 4 days in the Hoh rainforest region of Olympic National Park. The area is known for its mossy, ancient trees and near-constant rainfall, creating this eerie, primordial atmosphere that normally I'd find beautiful. Now I can't even look at pictures of forests without feeling that disturbing tightness in my chest, that fight-or-flight response kicking in. We'd booked a remote camping site, about 7 miles from the nearest ranger station. It'll be more authentic this way, Eric had insisted over the phone, his voice cracking with excitement. No tourists, no noise pollution, just us and the wilderness. God, how I wish we'd stayed at one of the popular spots instead. At least then someone might have heard us. The drive from Portland took about 4 hours, with the scenery gradually changing from urban sprawl to rural towns, and finally the lush, imposing wilderness of the Olympic Peninsula. The sky darkened as we approached, not just from the late afternoon hour, but from the thick blanket of clouds that seemed to hang permanently over the region. Rain started as a light drizzle, but quickly intensified into a steady downpour that hammered against the roof of Eric's Subaru. "Welcome to the rainforest," Melissa had said with a soft smile, her camera already out as she captured the fog-shrouded mountains through the car window. She had this calming presence about her, steady and observant. Jason sat beside me in the back, mostly quiet during the drive, occasionally pointing out landmarks or sharing facts about the local ecosystem. He seemed knowledgeable, which I found reassuring at the time. By the time we reached the trailhead, it was nearly 5 p.m., giving us maybe 3 hours of daylight to hike in and set up camp. The air felt heavy with moisture as we shouldered our packs, the scent of wet earth and decaying vegetation filling my nostrils. The trail ahead disappeared into a tangle of towering trees and undergrowth, like the mouth of some living entity waiting to swallow us whole. "This is going to be incredible," Eric had said, slapping my shoulder enthusiastically. If only we'd known what was waiting for us in those ancient woods, we would have turned around right then. But we didn't. Instead, we plunged into the forest, the sounds of civilization fading behind us with each step, replaced by the constant patter of rain on leaves, and something else, something I couldn't identify at the time, but now recognize as warning. Nature itself seemed to be telling us to stay away. The first signs that something was wrong came about 2 miles into our hike. The trail, which had been clearly marked on our maps, suddenly seemed to fork in a way that wasn't documented. Eric and Jason argued about which path to take, their voices rising above the steady rhythm of the rain. I stood back with Melissa, watching dark clouds gather overhead, making the forest dimmer by the minute. "I've hiked dozens of trails in Olympic," Jason insisted, pointing to the right fork. "This is the way to the camping area. The map must be outdated." He had this confidence that was hard to argue with, but something about his certainty felt off to me. Eric, never one to back down, was adamant that we should follow the official map, which showed no fork at all. The tension between them was palpable, like static electricity before a lightning strike. Eventually, we went with Jason's route, a decision I'd replay in my mind countless times in the weeks that followed. The path grew narrower, less maintained, with fallen logs and overgrown sections that forced us to climb and crawl in places. My pack, which hadn't seemed heavy at the trailhead, now felt like it was filled with stones. The trees closed in overhead, creating a canopy so dense that it seemed like twilight hours before sunset should have arrived. Does anyone else feel like we're being watched? Melissa whispered to me as we navigated a particularly overgrown section. I'd been trying to ignore that exact sensation, the prickling feeling on the back of my neck, the sense that eyes were tracking our every move from the shadowy undergrowth. I nodded but tried to play it off. Probably just wildlife. Bears maybe. Even as I said it, I knew this feeling wasn't about bears or any normal forest creature. By the time we reached a small clearing that could serve as our campsite, darkness had nearly fallen, and the rain had intensified into a torrential downpour. We rushed to set up our tents, fingers numb from cold and clothes soaked through. Eric struggled with the rain fly on his and Melissa's tent, cursing under his breath as the wind kept catching it. Jason, despite his supposed outdoor expertise, seemed distracted, constantly glancing toward the dense tree line surrounding our clearing. "Did you hear that?" he asked suddenly, freezing in place with his tent stake in hand. We all went quiet, straining to hear anything over the drumming of rain. At first, I heard nothing. Then, faintly, what sounded like whistling, not the natural whistle of wind through trees, but a deliberate melody, haunting and somehow familiar. "Probably just the wind," Eric said, but his voice lacked conviction. That night, huddled in my tent with Jason, I couldn't sleep. The rain created a constant background noise, but underneath it, I swore I could hear movement around our camp. Not the scurrying of small animals, but deliberate, heavy steps circling us. Jason must have heard it too. I could tell by his breathing that he was awake, though he pretended to sleep. Neither of us wanted to acknowledge the disturbing sounds, as if speaking about them might make whatever was out there take notice of us. When I finally did drift off, my dreams were filled with fragmented images. Moss-covered stones arranged in unnatural patterns, trees with faces twisted in silent screams, and most disturbingly, a figure standing at the edge of our camp, tall and thin with proportions that seemed wrong somehow, its features obscured by the darkness. I woke gasping for breath around 3 a.m., my heart racing. The rain had stopped, leaving an eerie silence broken only by the occasional drip from the trees. Outside our tent, something moved. A shadow passed across the nylon wall, illuminated briefly by the weak moonlight filtering through the clouds. I held my breath, paralyzed with fear. Jason was awake beside me, his eyes wide and reflecting the faint light. Neither of us dared to speak or move. Whatever was out there circled our tent once more before moving away. Only then did I release the breath I'd been holding, the air escaping in a shaky exhale that seemed thunderously loud in the quiet night. The next morning dawned gray and misty, the forest shrouded in a thick fog that limited visibility to maybe 20 feet in any direction. None of us mentioned the strange occurrences of the night before as we boiled water for coffee on our portable stove. It was as if acknowledging what we'd experienced would make it more real somehow. But I could see it in everyone's faces, the dark circles under Eric's usually bright eyes, the way Melissa's hands trembled slightly as she sipped her coffee, the uncharacteristic silence from Jason, who kept scanning the tree line. "I think we should head back today," I finally said, breaking the uncomfortable silence. The weather forecast mentioned a big storm coming in. This was a lie. We'd lost cell service miles ago and had no way of checking the weather, but it seemed like a reasonable excuse. Eric looked like he might argue, but then nodded slowly. "Yeah, maybe that's best. Something about this place feels." He trailed off, unable or unwilling to finish the thought. As we packed up our campsite, Melissa suddenly gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. We all turned to look where she was pointing. At the edge of our clearing, arranged in a perfect semicircle, were 7 small cairns, stacks of stones that definitely hadn't been there the night before. "Did one of you build those?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. We all shook our heads. The implications sent ice through my veins. Someone, or something, had been in our camp while we slept, meticulously arranging stones just feet from where we lay. Jason approached one of the cairns, studying it with a mixture of curiosity and dread. "These aren't random," he said softly. "They're positioned to point directly at our tents." As he reached out to touch one of the stone stacks, a sound cut through the fog. That same whistling we'd heard the night before, but closer now, more distinct. The melody was unsettling, almost familiar yet impossible to place, with notes that seemed to hang in the air unnaturally long. "We need to leave. Now." I didn't recognize my own voice, higher-pitched with barely controlled panic. No one argued as we hastily stuffed the rest of our gear into our packs, abandoning any pretense of a thorough camp cleanup. The whistling continued, seeming to come from all directions at once, disorienting us as we tried to find the trail back. The fog had thickened, turning the forest into a maze of ghostly tree trunks and shifting shadows. That's when we realized Jason was missing. One moment he was behind me on the narrow path, and the next, gone. We called his name, our voices sounding flat and muffled in the dense fog. No response came. Eric wanted to split up to search, but Melissa and I vetoed that immediately. Separating seemed like the worst possible idea. Instead, we backtracked, calling for Jason every few steps. The silence that answered was deafening. After 20 terrifying minutes, we found one of Jason's boots in the middle of the path, with no sign of Jason himself. The boot was wet not just with rain, but with something darker, thicker. Melissa let out a choked sob when she saw it. Eric picked it up, examining it with shaking hands. There's blood, he confirmed, his voice cracking. As if on cue, a scream tore through the forest. Undeniably Jason's voice, filled with such primal terror that it hardly sounded human. We ran toward the sound, crashing through underbrush, branches whipping at our faces. The fog seemed to part just enough to lead us forward, then close behind us like a trap. We emerged into another small clearing and stopped dead in our tracks. In the center stood a figure that, at first glance, resembled a man, tall, dressed in what looked like tattered hiking gear. But as it turned toward us, I realized with creeping horror that what I was seeing wasn't human. Its proportions were wrong, limbs too long, joints bending at impossible angles. Its face was the worst part. Features that approximated human ones, but were subtly, terrifyingly distorted, like someone's crude attempt to sculpt a human face without ever having seen one. And its eyes were completely black, reflecting nothing, absorbing light like twin voids. In one elongated hand, it held Jason's backpack, dripping with something dark and viscous. Melissa's scream shattered the moment. The creature's head snapped toward her with unnatural speed, those black void eyes fixing on her face. Eric reacted first, grabbing both our arms and yanking us backward. "Run!" he shouted, his voice cracking with terror. We turned and fled, crashing through the underbrush with no regard for the trail or direction, driven purely by primal fear. Behind us, something moved through the forest with horrifying efficiency. Not the crashing progress of humans panicking through underbrush, but a swift, silent pursuit that seemed to flow around obstacles rather than through them. The whistling started again, now clearly coming from whatever was chasing us, the melody distorting into something that made my ears hurt and my vision blur at the edges. "We need to split up," Eric gasped as we paused momentarily behind a massive fallen tree. "It can't follow all of us." The look Melissa gave him was one I'll never forget, pure betrayal mixed with disbelief. "Are you insane?" she hissed. "That thing has Jason. We're not separating." I nodded in agreement, too winded to speak. Whatever was hunting us had already picked off one of our group. Dividing our remaining strength seemed like suicide. The decision was made for us when the creature suddenly appeared atop the log we were hiding behind, moving so silently that none of us had detected its approach. Up close, its wrongness was even more apparent. Skin that didn't look like skin at all, but some slick, mottled surface that shifted subtly like oil on water. It made a sound then, not whistling but a series of clicks and pops that somehow formed words. "Visitors. Stay. Play." In that moment of paralyzed horror, Eric did something I still can't believe. He threw his heavy backpack directly at the thing's face and screamed at us to run in opposite directions. The creature fell backward, momentarily disoriented, and we scattered. I ran west, or what I thought was west. Melissa headed east, and Eric straight south. It was the last time I would see Eric alive. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs threatened to give out, stumbling over roots and rocks, branches tearing at my clothes and skin. The rain had started again, a cold, driving downpour that reduced visibility to almost nothing. When I finally collapsed against a tree, gasping for breath, I had no idea how far I'd come or in what direction. The forest looked the same in every direction, endless trees disappearing into fog and rain. That's when I heard Melissa's voice, faint but unmistakable, calling my name. Relief flooded through me as I moved toward the sound. "Melissa," I called back. "Keep talking. I'll find you." As I drew closer, something felt wrong. Her voice had an odd quality to it, a subtle wrongness similar to the creature's approximation of human features. I slowed, suddenly wary. "Melissa? Daniel, help me." The voice was perfect now, exactly Melissa's timbre and cadence. Too perfect, like a recording rather than a living voice affected by fear and exhaustion. I stopped, heart pounding. Through the curtain of rain, I could make out a figure about 50 feet away. It looked like Melissa, her height, her build, her bright red raincoat. But it stood unnaturally still, and as I watched, its head rotated 180 degrees to look at me while its body remained facing away. While rose in my throat as I backed away, trying not to make a sound. Whatever this thing was, it could mimic us, our voices, our appearances. How could I trust anything or anyone I encountered in these woods now? As if sensing my realization, the Melissa thing's form began to ripple and distort, stretching upward into the now familiar elongated shape of the creature. It began moving toward me with that unnatural fluid motion, covering ground far faster than any human could. I turned and ran again, no plan beyond putting distance between myself and the horror behind me. The forest seemed to be actively working against me now. Roots appeared where I was sure the ground had been clear, branches whipped back to strike my face, the very path itself seeming to twist and change. Through my panic, one thought crystallized. I needed to find the original trail. It was our only hope of getting back to civilization. By some miracle or random chance, I stumbled across what looked like a maintained path. Whether it was our original trail or another one, I couldn't tell, but it represented my best chance at escape. I followed it, pushing my body well past its limits, the creatures whistling sometimes close, sometimes distant, but always present. The rain became my ally, masking my sounds and scent, helping me maintain some distance from my pursuer. After what felt like hours but might have been minutes, time had lost all meaning in my terrified state. I emerged from the densest part of the forest onto what was unmistakably the main trail. The sight of clear path markers nearly brought me to my knees with relief. I allowed myself only a moment's pause before continuing, moving as quickly as my exhausted body would permit. The whistling had faded, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the creature was simply changing tactics rather than giving up the hunt. As I rounded a bend in the trail, I collided with someone coming from the opposite direction. Both of us went down hard, and I scrambled back, expecting to see the distorted features of the creature. Instead, I found myself face to face with a park ranger, a middle-aged woman whose expression shifted from annoyance to concern as she took in my disheveled, bloodied state. "Sir, are you all right?" she asked, reaching out a hand to help me up. I couldn't stop shaking, couldn't form coherent sentences as I tried to explain about my friends, about the creature in the woods. The ranger, whose name tag read Martinez, listened with increasing skepticism as my story poured out in fragmented, frantic bursts. She clearly thought I was having some kind of breakdown or bad reaction to something I'd consumed. "Let's get you to the ranger station," she said finally, in the soothing tone one might use with a frightened child. "We'll send out a search party for your friends. Can you show me where you were camping?" I tried to pinpoint our location on her map, but nothing looked familiar. The fork in the trail that had started our nightmare wasn't marked, just as it hadn't been on our map. At the ranger station, I repeated my story to increasingly dubious officials while search teams were dispatched to look for Eric, Melissa, and Jason. I sat wrapped in a blanket, shivering not from cold, but from the adrenaline crash and lingering terror. Hours passed with no word. Night fell again, and with it came a fresh wave of panic that kept me from sleeping despite my exhaustion. The search continued for 3 days. On the second day, they found our original campsite, though according to the rangers, it was miles from where it should have been based on the trail maps. There was no sign of the stone cairns I described, or any unusual disturbance beyond what would be expected from campers. On the third day, they found Eric's body in a ravine about 2 miles from the camp, his neck broken from what appeared to be a fall. Of Melissa and Jason, there was no trace. The official report listed Eric's death as an accidental fall during a hiking expedition that went off marked trails. Melissa and Jason were classified as missing persons, presumed to have become lost in the vast wilderness of Olympic National Park. Despite extensive searches, no further evidence was ever found. The case was eventually shelved, becoming just another tragic statistic about the dangers of wilderness exploration. I know the truth, though. Sometimes, late at night when rain lashes against my windows, I swear I can hear that whistling, that unnatural melody that still haunts my dreams. More disturbing are the voicemails I occasionally receive from Melissa's number, containing nothing but static and what sounds like clicking, popping approximations of words. The police say it's just random calls from a number that's been reassigned, but I know better. The most terrifying development came 6 months after our trip, when I received a postcard in the mail. It showed the Hoh rainforest in all its primeval beauty, but it was the handwriting on the back that made my blood run cold. Jason's handwriting, yet subtly wrong, as if someone or something was painstakingly copying it. The message was simple: missing you. Come back to play. We're waiting. The postmark was from Forks, Washington, a small town near Olympic National Park. I've moved twice since then, changed my phone number, deleted all social media. But I can't shake the feeling that it's only a matter of time before whatever dwells in those ancient, rain-soaked forests finds me. Sometimes, when fog rolls in off the Columbia River, I catch glimpses of impossibly tall, thin figures at the edge of my vision, gone when I turn to look directly. And always, there's that whistling, distant but growing closer, a melody that no human throat could produce. The Rangers never did find that fork in the trail, the one that led us off the map and into something's hunting ground. I've checked every official map of Olympic National Park since then, and none show the path we took. It's as if it never existed, or as if it only exists when it wants to be found, when it's calling new visitors to stray from safety and venture into its domain. So if you're planning a camping trip to Olympic National Park, stick to the marked trails and populated campgrounds. And if you hear whistling in the woods, run, and don't look back. My name's Alexandra Marie Bennett, and I'm 32 years old. I live in Seattle, where I work as an environmental science researcher at the university. I've always loved the outdoors, which makes what happened at North Cascades National Park all the more ironic. Whenever I close my eyes now, I can still hear the rain pelting against our tent, still feel that creeping dread as night descended around us. It was supposed to be a simple birthday celebration for my best friend, Vanessa Reyes. 6 of us made the trip: Vanessa, her husband Connor, our mutual friends from graduate school, Darius Williams and his partner Elijah, and my younger brother Ryan, who'd recently moved to Tacoma after finishing college. I was the experienced one, having hiked most of Washington's major trails over the years. This time, I chose the remote Thunder Creek Trail, known for its pristine wilderness and isolation. In retrospect, that isolation is what doomed us. The weather forecast called for typical Washington spring conditions, periods of rain interspersed with cloudy breaks. Nothing we couldn't handle with proper gear. We'd planned a 3-night trip, hiking in about 8 miles to set up a base camp near a tributary that wasn't marked on the standard tourist maps. I discovered it on a solo trip the previous year and had been eager to share the pristine location with people I cared about. Now I wake up screaming, wishing I'd never set foot on that trail again. The drive from Seattle took about 3 hours, with us stopping in the small town of Marble Mount for final supplies. The local general store owner gave us a curious look when I mentioned our destination. "Thunder Creek's beautiful this time of year," he said, restocking a shelf of trail mix. "But you might want to stay on the main paths. Some hikers went missing up by that north tributary last fall. They found 2 of them, but the third—" He trailed off, shaking his head. I should have heeded his warning, recognized it for what it was. Instead, I dismissed it as small-town superstition. We reached the trailhead around noon, the sky already darkening with heavy clouds that shrouded the mountain peaks. The air had that distinctive smell: wet earth, pine, and something mineral that's unique to the Cascades after rainfall. We divided the gear among our packs, double-checked our maps and emergency supplies, and set off into the dense forest that would become our nightmare. The first few miles were exactly what I'd promised everyone: breathtaking virgin forest with towering Douglas firs and western red cedars, some over 1,000 years old. The trail followed Thunder Creek, swollen with spring runoff, its roar providing a constant soundtrack to our hike. Darius kept stopping to photograph interesting fungi and plant specimens, his biologist's eye-catching details the rest of us missed. Vanessa and Connor walked hand in hand despite the challenging terrain, still in that honeymoon phase after 2 years of marriage. My brother Ryan stuck close to me, uncharacteristically quiet. When we stopped for a water break about 4 miles in, he pulled me aside. "Does something feel off to you?" he asked, his voice low so the others couldn't hear. I followed his gaze to the dense undergrowth surrounding the trail. "The birds," he continued. "There aren't any. No chickadees, no jays, nothing." I hadn't noticed until he pointed it out, but he was right. The forest was eerily silent except for the creek and the steady drip of moisture from the canopy above. "Probably just the weather," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Animals seek shelter before storms." Ryan nodded, but didn't look convinced. As we resumed hiking, the rain began again, starting as a light mist before intensifying to a steady downpour that penetrated even the dense tree cover. By the time we reached our planned camping area, we were all soaked despite our rain gear, and daylight was rapidly fading. Setting up camp in the pouring rain tested everyone's patience. Connor struggled with tent poles that kept slipping from his cold fingers, while Elijah tried to stretch tarps between trees to create a dry space for cooking. The normally laid-back Darius snapped at Vanessa when she accidentally knocked over his carefully organized gear. The tension was palpable, unusual for our typically easygoing group. "This spot doesn't look right," I muttered, scanning the clearing as I hammered tent stakes into the soggy ground. The tributary I remembered should have been about 50 yards to the north, but I couldn't hear its distinctive splashing sound. I pulled out my map, protected in its waterproof case, and tried to reconcile our location with my memory. Something didn't add up. The topography matched, but key landmarks seemed shifted, as if the map itself had warped. Ryan noticed my confusion and came over, water dripping from his rain jacket hood. "Are we lost?" he asked bluntly. I shook my head, more out of pride than certainty. "No, we're here," I insisted, pointing to a spot on the map. The tributary must have changed course with the spring runoff. "It happens." Even as I said it, doubt gnawed at me. Rivers don't just relocate overnight, and I'd hiked this area extensively. By the time we finished setting up our 3 tents, darkness had fallen completely. We huddled under the tarp, using our camp stoves to heat freeze-dried meals that no one really had the appetite for. The rain had mercifully lightened to a drizzle, but the damage to morale was done. Everyone was wet, cold, and irritable. Connor suggested hiking back out in the morning if the weather didn't improve, and to my surprise, I found myself agreeing. That night, I shared a tent with Vanessa while Connor bunked with my brother. Darius and Elijah took the 3rd tent. Despite my exhaustion, sleep eluded me. Every sound from the forest seemed amplified. The drip of water from leaves, the occasional crack of a branch, the distant rumble of thunder. Around 2 a.m., I heard a sound that sent ice through my veins, whistling. Not the wind through trees, but a deliberate, melodic tune that no animal could produce. "Do you hear that?" I whispered to Vanessa, who stirred in her sleeping bag. She murmured something unintelligible and rolled over. The whistling continued for maybe 30 seconds before stopping abruptly. I held my breath, straining to hear any movement outside our tent. After several tense minutes of silence, I convinced myself I'd imagined it, a dream bleeding into wakefulness, nothing more. Morning brought no relief from the rain or my unease. As we prepared breakfast under our makeshift shelter, I noticed Elijah examining something on the ground at the edge of our campsite. Curious, I walked over to find him crouched over a peculiar arrangement of stones. 5 smaller rocks placed in a circle around a larger, flat stone. On the center stone was a crude drawing made with some kind of red pigment. "Did one of you make this?" Elijah asked, looking up at me with furrowed brows. I shook my head as the others gathered around. The drawing depicted stick figures, 6 of them, arranged in a circle. Above them hovered a larger, more abstract shape that made me think of a cloud or a hand reaching down. "Probably just previous campers," Darius suggested, though he didn't sound convinced. "Let's pack up," I decided, that gnawing sense of wrongness growing stronger by the minute. "We'll head back to the main trail and find a better spot." No one argued. As we dismantled our campsite, Ryan approached me with something clutched in his hand. Found this tangled in the brush over there, he said quietly, opening his palm to reveal a thin braided bracelet made of dark leather and red thread. It looked handmade, tribal almost. Probably lost by another hiker, I said, though the bracelet looked too fresh, too clean to have been exposed to the elements for long. Ryan nodded but slipped it into his pocket rather than discarding it. That simple action, his decision to keep the bracelet, would haunt me for months afterward. We'd been hiking for about an hour, retracing our steps toward the main trail, when Vanessa stopped suddenly. "This isn't right," she said, pointing ahead. "That fallen cedar wasn't there yesterday." She was right. Blocking our path was a massive cedar, its enormous root system torn from the ground, the surrounding earth freshly disturbed. It hadn't been there the day before. A tree that size would have been impossible to miss or circumvent without leaving the trail. "Maybe we took a wrong turn," Connor suggested, pulling out his GPS device. He frowned at the screen. "That's weird. It's not getting a signal." One by one, we checked our phones and other devices. None had service or GPS functionality, despite having worked perfectly the previous day. A chill that had nothing to do with the damp weather crept up my spine as we stood there, 6 educated, rational adults suddenly facing a situation that defied logical explanation. "We need to climb over it," Darius decided, approaching the fallen cedar. "The main trail can't be more than a mile or 2 from here." As he placed his hand on the massive trunk, he jerked back suddenly with a sharp cry of pain. Blood welled from a deep gash across his palm. "What the hell?" he gasped, examining the wound. There were no visible branches or sharp edges where he'd touched the tree. Elijah rushed to his partner's side, pulling a first aid kit from his pack. As he cleaned and bandaged the mysterious wound, I examined the tree more closely, careful not to touch the bark. That's when I noticed them. Tiny, almost microscopic barbs embedded in the trunk's surface, like thousands of miniature thorns. They weren't natural. No cedar has defensive structures like that. "We need to go around," I said, backing away from the tree, through the underbrush. No one was thrilled at the prospect, but with the trail blocked, we had little choice. I led the way, using a stick to push aside the dense ferns and berry bushes. The forest seemed to thicken with every step, branches reaching out like grasping fingers, thorny vines appearing where none should grow in this ecosystem. After 20 minutes of painfully slow progress, Ryan stopped abruptly. "Listen," he hissed. We all went still. At first, I heard nothing beyond the constant patter of rain on leaves. Then it came, that same whistling I'd heard in the night, but closer now, more distinct. It moved around us, seeming to come from one direction then another, as if the source was circling our group. "Hello," Connor called out, his voice echoing weakly through the trees. "Is someone there?" The whistling stopped immediately. The silence that followed was somehow worse. Heavy, expectant, like the forest itself was holding its breath. Then came a sound that still visits me in nightmares. Laughter. Not joyful or even mocking, but wrong, like someone who had only read descriptions of laughter trying to reproduce the sound. "We need to run," Vanessa whispered, clutching Connor's arm with white-knuckled fingers. But which way? We'd lost all sense of direction in the trackless undergrowth, with cloud cover preventing even basic navigation by the sun. Panic began to set in as we realized our situation, lost in dense wilderness with something out there, something that could mimic human sounds. That's when Darius gasped, pointing to a tree about 20 yards away. There, partially hidden behind the trunk, stood a figure. From that distance and through the rain, details were hard to make out, but something about its proportions seemed off, too tall, too thin, its limbs at slightly wrong angles. It didn't move, just stood watching us with what seemed like patience. "Hello," Elijah called out, taking a step toward the figure. "We're lost hikers. Can you help us?" The figure remained motionless for a long moment, then raised one impossibly long arm and beckoned with fingers that seemed to have too many joints. No one moved. The figure beckoned again, more insistently. "Don't," I breathed, grabbing Elijah's sleeve as he took another hesitant step forward. "That's not a person." As if confirming my words, the figure's head tilted at an angle no human neck could achieve, nearly touching its own shoulder. Then it stepped fully into view, and any lingering doubt vanished. Its body was humanoid, but wrong. Limbs too elongated, joints bending in impossible directions. It wore what looked like tattered hiking clothes, as if it had dressed itself in someone else's abandoned gear. Its face was the most disturbing part. Features that approximated human ones, but were slightly askew, like a child's drawing come to life. Its eyes were too large, too dark, showing no whites at all. Its mouth stretched too wide across its face, revealing teeth that looked more like small, jagged stones than anything that belonged in a human mouth. Ryan was the first to break from our collective paralysis. "Run!" he shouted, grabbing my arm and pulling me backward. We turned and fled, crashing through the underbrush with no plan beyond putting distance between ourselves and the thing that watched us with those terrible dark eyes. Behind us came that mockery of laughter again, followed by the sound of something moving through the forest, not the frantic crashing of panicked humans, but a swift, almost liquid progress that seemed to flow around obstacles. We ran blindly through the forest, the rational part of my brain screaming that we were making a terrible mistake. Splitting up in wilderness is survival rule number one. But terror had overridden training. I found myself alone with Ryan, the others scattered in different directions as we dodged through the dense trees. My brother gripped my hand so tightly it hurt, pulling me forward whenever I slowed. "Keep moving," he gasped, his face pale with fear beneath the rain that streamed down his skin. "It's following us." I didn't ask how he knew. I could feel it too, a presence behind us, moving with purposeful intent. The whistling started again, now coming from multiple directions, as if we were being herded. We burst into a small clearing and stopped to catch our breath, both of us scanning the tree line frantically. "The others," I panted, bent over with my hands on my knees. "We need to find them." Ryan nodded, pulling out his phone in a futile attempt to contact our friends. Still no signal. The rain had intensified again, reducing visibility to maybe 20 feet in any direction. That's when we heard Vanessa's scream, high-pitched and abruptly cut short. It came from somewhere to our left, maybe 100 yards away. Ryan immediately moved toward the sound, but I grabbed his arm. "Wait," I whispered. "Remember what that thing did with the laughter? What if it's mimicking her?" Even as I said it, I hated myself for the implication that Vanessa might already be beyond helping. Ryan hesitated, torn between the instinct to help and the growing realization of what we were dealing with. Before he could decide, we heard Connor's voice, calling Vanessa's name with increasing desperation. His shouts were moving in our direction. Minutes later, he stumbled into our clearing, soaked and wild-eyed, a bloody gash across his forehead. "It took her," he choked out, collapsing to his knees in the mud. "It just appeared behind her, and God, it moved so fast." His body shook with silent sobs as rain mixed with the blood on his face. "Darius and Elijah?" I asked, dreading the answer. Connor shook his head. "We got separated." "I don't know." A branch snapped at the edge of the clearing. All three of us froze, staring at the spot where the sound had come from. Through the curtain of rain, a figure emerged, Darius, moving with an odd, stiff gait. Relief flooded through me for a split second before instinct sent warning signals blaring through my mind. Something was wrong with the way he moved, the way he held himself. "Guys," he called, his voice flat, lacking the stress and fear it should have contained. "I found the trail. Follow me." He extended an arm, beckoning just as the creature had done earlier. Connor rose shakily to his feet, taking a step toward what looked like our friend. Ryan's grip on my arm tightened painfully. "That's not Darius," he whispered, barely audible over the rain. As if hearing him despite the distance, the Darius thing's head snapped toward us with that same impossible angle. Its face seemed to ripple for a moment, features becoming fluid, uncertain. Then its mouth stretched into that too-wide smile, revealing stone-like teeth. "Run!" I screamed, shoving Connor toward the trees on the opposite side of the clearing. The creature abandoned its pretense, body elongating as it flowed toward us with terrifying speed. We crashed through the undergrowth, blind with panic. Behind us, that horrible laughter bubbled up again, closer with each passing second. The ground suddenly dropped away beneath my feet. I had a moment of vertigo before hitting a steep, muddy slope and beginning to slide downward uncontrollably. Ryan and Connor tumbled down beside me, all of us helpless against gravity and the slick terrain. We fetched up against rocks and fallen trees, the breath knocked from our lungs. Above us, silhouetted against the gray sky, The creature paused at the edge of the drop-off, that too-wide head tilted in apparent consideration. Then, miraculously, it retreated, disappearing back into the forest. We lay stunned, battered, and confused by its sudden departure. Why didn't it follow? Connor gasped, clutching his side where a rib had likely cracked in the fall. The answer came in the form of a roaring sound that had been masked by the rain and our panicked flight. Water. We'd tumbled down an embankment to the edge of Thunder Creek, now a raging torrent from the constant rainfall. It doesn't cross water, Ryan said suddenly, pulling himself to his knees. The bracelet. It had symbols for water boundaries. He reached for his pocket, then frowned. It's gone. Must have fallen out during the slide. There was no time to question his conclusion. If water provided safety, we needed to use that advantage. We follow the creek, I decided, helping Connor to his feet. It flows toward the main park areas. If we stay close to the water, we might make it. It was a desperate plan, but the only one we had. The creek banks were treacherous, slippery rocks, fallen trees, stretches where the water had eroded the shore entirely, but they offered our only path to safety. We followed Thunder Creek for what felt like hours, the gray daylight gradually fading as evening approached. Each of us was lost in private horror, processing what we'd witnessed and who we'd lost. Connor moved like a man sleepwalking, his eyes vacant, occasionally whispering Vanessa's name. Ryan kept scanning the forest edge, flinching at every sound that wasn't water or rain. I focused on keeping us moving, ignoring the pain from numerous cuts and bruises sustained in our fall. There, Ryan said suddenly, pointing ahead. Through the trees, barely visible in the fading light, stood a structure, the wooden bridge that marked the junction of Thunder Creek Trail with the main park pathway. Relief surged through me, making my knees weak. Just a few more miles of maintained trail, and we'd reach the ranger station. We hurried toward the bridge, our pace quickening with renewed hope. As we approached, I noticed something strange, objects hanging from the railings, dangling over the rushing water. Getting closer, my step faltered as recognition hit. They were personal items, a water bottle, a red bandana I recognized as Vanessa's, a camera strap that had to be Darius's. "It's waiting for us," Ryan whispered, stopping several yards from the bridge. "It's showing us it has them." Connor made a choked sound, reaching for Vanessa's bandana with trembling fingers. I grabbed his arm, pulling him back. "Don't touch anything," I warned. "It's a trap." As if summoned by my words, the creature appeared on the far side of the bridge. It stood motionless, watching us with those terrible dark eyes. This time, it had abandoned any pretense of humanity, its true form fully revealed, impossibly tall and thin, with too many joints in its limbs, its skin a mottled gray-green that seemed to shift and ripple like the surface of the creek. "What do we do?" Connor asked, his voice cracking with desperation. The creature tilted its head, then raised one elongated arm to point at him specifically. From its distorted mouth came Vanessa's voice, perfect in every detail. "Connor, help me, please." Connor lurched forward as if physically pulled. I grabbed him, Ryan helping to hold him back as he struggled against us. "It's not her," I shouted. "Connor, it's mimicking her." The creature's mouth stretched into that horrible approximation of a smile, clearly enjoying the torment it was causing. "The water," Ryan muttered. "It won't cross the water." He was right. The creature remained on the far side of the bridge, using Vanessa's voice as bait rather than coming for us directly. "We need another way across," I said, scanning the raging creek for fallen trees or rocks we could use. There was nothing within sight, and darkness was falling rapidly. Connor suddenly went still in our grasp. "Let me go," he said calmly. Too calmly. "I have an idea." Cautiously, we released him. He took a deep breath, then locked eyes with me. "Get help. I'll keep it occupied." Before I could process what he meant, he sprinted toward the bridge. "Connor, no!" I screamed, lunging after him, but Ryan held me back with surprising strength. Connor reached the bridge and stopped halfway across, directly above the deepest part of the creek. The creature moved toward him, that terrible smile widening in anticipation. "This is for Vanessa," Connor shouted, and without hesitation, he vaulted over the railing, plunging into the raging waters below. The creature let out a sound, not laughter or whistling this time, but a high-pitched screech of frustration. It reached the center of the bridge where Connor had stood, elongated fingers grasping at empty air. Ryan pulled me away, his face streaked with tears. "Run," he gasped. While it's distracted, my mind rebelled against leaving, against abandoning any hope of finding Connor in the creek below, but survival instinct took over. We ran, following the main trail away from the bridge, away from that terrible creature that had just cost us another friend. Night had fallen completely by the time we reached the ranger station, bursting through the door with our wild tale of monsters and missing friends. The rangers, of course, didn't believe us. They attributed our story to hypothermia, trauma from losing our friends to the dangerous conditions and terrain. Search parties were dispatched at first light, but I knew what they would find: nothing. 3 days later, they recovered Connor's body 2 miles downstream. His death ruled as an accidental drowning. Of Vanessa, Darius, and Elijah, no trace was ever found, despite one of the most extensive search operations in North Cascades history. The official report listed them as missing, presumed dead from exposure or falling in the hazardous backcountry. Ryan and I knew better. We tried telling our story to the authorities, to the media, to anyone who would listen. Most dismissed us as traumatized or attention-seeking. A few fringe paranormal websites picked up our account, but without evidence, we became just another dubious tale of wilderness horror filed alongside Bigfoot sightings and UFO encounters. 6 months after our ordeal, Ryan disappeared. He'd gone back to the park alone, against my desperate pleas, determined to find proof of what we'd encountered, to vindicate our friends' memories. The rangers found his backpack near Thunder Creek Bridge, with his journal inside. The final entry read simply, "It's mimicking me now. I can feel it learning. Don't come looking." I moved away from Washington after that, unable to bear the constant rainfall that reminded me of those terrible days in the forest. I settled in Arizona, where the dry heat and clear skies offered some respite from the memories. But they find me anyway, especially in dreams. That whistling, that wrong laughter, those 2 dark eyes watching from between trees. Last week, I received a package with no return address. Inside was a familiar braided bracelet of dark leather and red thread. Attached was a note in Ryan's handwriting. "It can cross water now. It's learning. It's coming." I burned the bracelet and the note, but it was a futile gesture. Deep down, I know the truth. Whatever lives in those ancient forests of Washington isn't confined by physical barriers or conventional logic. Sometimes, when rain falls unexpectedly in the desert night, I hear whistling outside my window. And sometimes, when I'm brave enough to look, I catch glimpses of something too tall and too thin moving between the cacti. Its proportions all wrong, its head tilted at an impossible angle. It's patient, this thing from the forest. It followed me across a continent, and it can wait a little longer to complete its collection. So if you're planning a camping trip to North Cascades, stick to the populated campgrounds. Don't venture off trail, especially not near Thunder Creek. And if you hear whistling in the rain, or someone calling your name with a voice that sounds just a little too perfect, don't follow. Some things in those ancient forests were never meant to be encountered, and once they notice you, they never, ever let go. My name is Thomas Andrew Parker, and I'm 28 years old. I live in Seattle, where the constant drizzle and overcast skies have become as familiar to me as my own reflection. I work as an environmental journalist, which means I spend a lot of time exploring the natural wonders of the Pacific Northwest. That's what brought me to Olympic National Park that terrible weekend in October, an assignment to cover the changing ecosystem of the Hoh rainforest. Looking back now, I wish I'd never set foot in that ancient, moss-covered wilderness. I wasn't alone on this trip. My photographer, Eliza, came along to capture images for the piece. She was relatively new to our publication, but had an impressive portfolio of nature photography. Then there was my old college buddy, Marcus, who'd been begging to join one of my adventures for years. He brought his girlfriend, Vanessa, a park ranger from Mount Rainier who knew more about surviving in the wilderness than the rest of us combined. The final member of our group was my cousin Derek, who'd been struggling with some personal demons and needed an escape from city life. We'd planned to spend 3 nights camping in the heart of the Hoh rainforest, one of the largest temperate rainforests in the U.S. The weather forecast warned of heavy rainfall, even by Washington standards, but that was nothing unusual for October in the Olympic Peninsula. Besides, the story I was working on focused on how the ecosystem thrived because of the constant moisture. The rainfall was part of the experience, I told myself. The drive from Seattle took longer than expected. Traffic was heavy leaving the city, and by the time we reached the park entrance, the sun was already beginning to set behind the thick canopy of trees. A disturbing sense of unease settled over me as we checked in with the ranger station. The attendant, an older man with weathered skin and distant eyes, warned us about recent bear activity in the area. But there was something in his expression that suggested he was holding something back. "Just stay on the marked trails," he said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "And if you hear anything unusual at night, just ignore it." Sound carries strangely in the rainforest. Before I could ask what he meant, he handed over our permits and quickly moved on to the next visitors. Marcus joked about the cryptic warning, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were missing something important. The rain started as we hiked to our designated camping area, a light drizzle at first that quickly intensified into a steady downpour. By the time we reached the small clearing where we'd set up camp, we were all soaked to the bone despite our expensive rain gear. The dense canopy above offered little protection, and the constant patter of raindrops on leaves created an unsettling percussion that seemed to follow us everywhere. As we set up our tents, I noticed Derek had become unusually quiet. When I asked if he was okay, he just nodded and mumbled something about the forest feeling wrong. I chalked it up to his recent struggles with anxiety, but part of me understood what he meant. Despite being filled with life, the verdant ferns, towering cedars, and lush moss covering every surface, there was something profoundly lonely about this place, as if the forest itself was watching us with ancient, unblinking eyes. That first night, huddled around our small camp stove, open fires weren't permitted due to the wet conditions. Vanessa told us about the local indigenous legends surrounding the Hoh rainforest. The Quileute people believed the forest was home to powerful spirits, she explained, entities that didn't always welcome human visitors. They say if you listen carefully on the rainiest nights, you can hear the spirits whispering to each other, she said, her face eerily illuminated by the blue flame of our camp stove. And if they learn your name, they'll call to you from the darkness. Marcus laughed nervously and suggested we turn the conversation to something less scary, but the seed had been planted in my mind. As I lay in my tent that night, listening to the relentless rain, I could have sworn I heard something else beneath the natural sounds of the forest, something that sounded disturbingly like my name. I woke the next morning to find Derek sitting outside his tent, staring into the woods with bloodshot eyes. He hadn't slept at all, he told me. Something was moving around our camp all night, he whispered, his voice hoarse. I could hear it circling, stopping at each tent like it was, "I don't know, Thomas," like it was deciding. The others brushed off his concerns, sleep deprivation and anxiety playing tricks, they said, but I'd heard something too, though I hadn't wanted to admit it. Breakfast was a subdued affair. The rain had momentarily eased to a misty drizzle, but the sky remained leaden, and water continued to drip from every leaf and branch. Our plan for the day was to hike deeper into the forest to photograph some of the oldest trees in the ecosystem, massive Sitka spruces that had stood for centuries. Eliza was particularly excited about capturing the interplay of light and moss in what she called the perfect gloomy conditions. As we packed our day bags, I noticed Marcus examining something on the ground near our tents. "Did any of you go wandering last night?" he asked, his tone casual, but his expression concerned. We all denied it, and he pointed to a set of indentations in the soft ground that circled our campsite. They weren't quite footprints, at least not human ones, more like the impression something heavy had made as it methodically made its circuit around our tents. Vanessa suggested it was probably just a deer or elk, though she didn't sound convinced. The markings were oddly spaced and seemed too deliberate for an animal foraging for food. The hike that morning should have been spectacular. The Hoh rainforest is one of the most beautiful places on Earth, with its hanging moss creating an otherworldly atmosphere and ancient trees stretching impossibly high. But I couldn't focus on the scenery. Every few minutes, I'd catch movement in my peripheral vision, only to turn and find nothing there. The others were experiencing it too, that prickly feeling of being watched that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Around midday, We reached a grove of giant spruces that Eliza wanted to photograph. While she set up her equipment, the rest of us spread out to explore the immediate area. That's when I found it. A crude symbol carved into the trunk of one of the oldest trees. The carving looked fresh, the exposed with still light against the dark bark. It resembled a spiral with strange markings radiating outward, unlike anything I recognized from my research on local indigenous art. When I called Vanessa over to look, her face paled. "We need to leave," she said flatly, already backing away from the tree. When Marcus demanded an explanation, she hesitated before explaining that the symbol was associated with an obscure ritual practiced by a splinter group that had been banned from the local tribe generations ago. "It's a summoning mark," she said, her voice barely audible over the now increasing rain. "They believe they could call forth an entity from the depths of the forest, something that feeds on fear and confusion before it feeds on." She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. An argument erupted. Marcus and Eliza wanted to continue with our planned hike. We'd come all this way for the story, after all, while Vanessa insisted we return to camp immediately and consider cutting our trip short. Derek said nothing but looked ready to bolt at any moment. I found myself caught in the middle, torn between professional responsibility and the growing dread that had settled in my stomach. In the end, we compromised. We'd finish taking the photographs Eliza needed, then head back to camp and reassess. That decision would haunt me for the rest of my life. As we worked, the rain intensified dramatically, falling in sheets that reduced visibility to just a few yards. The sound was deafening, drowning out our voices, so we had to shout to be heard. But somehow, beneath the roar of the downpour, I could still make out another sound, a rhythmic, whispering chant that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. When I asked if anyone else heard it, they all shook their heads, looking at me with growing concern. The journey back to camp took twice as long as it should have. The trail, which had been clearly visible that morning, now seemed to shift and change before our eyes. Twice we found ourselves circling back to the same massive fallen log, despite Vanessa's insistence that we'd been walking in a straight line. The third time it happened, Marcus lost his temper, accusing her of deliberately leading us in circles. The argument that followed was ugly, with old resentments bubbling to the surface as fear tightened its grip on all of us. By the time we stumbled back into our campsite, dusk was falling, bringing with it a darkness that seemed to have physical weight. Our tents stood exactly where we'd left them, but something was different. It took me a moment to realize what it was. All of our tents were now arranged in a perfect circle when I was certain we'd set them up in a rough line the day before. No one would admit to rearranging them, and no one wanted to suggest what that might mean. Instead, we huddled together beneath the vestibule of my tent, soaked and shivering, as night fell completely and the rainforest came alive with sounds that no longer seemed natural at all. The rain hammered down without mercy, turning the ground beneath our tents into a muddy soup. None of us suggested moving the tents back to their original positions, some unspoken agreement that acknowledging the change would make whatever was happening more real. We retreated to our separate shelters early, each of us desperate for the false security of nylon walls and sleeping bags. I shared my tent with Derek, whose trembling had become constant. He kept whispering that it knows our names now, over and over until I finally drifted into an uneasy sleep. The scream that woke me tore through the night like a physical force. It was Eliza, her voice contorted with a terror that didn't sound entirely human. By the time I fumbled with my flashlight and stumbled out into the rain, Marcus was already at her tent, frantically trying to unzip the entrance. When he finally got it open, Eliza burst out, her eyes wild, her body shaking violently. "It was in there with me," she gasped between sobs. "It was breathing on my neck." We searched her tent, but found nothing except her sleeping bag, which was now decorated with the same spiral symbol we'd seen carved into the tree, this time drawn in what looked horribly like mud mixed with blood. No one slept after that. We crowded into Marcus and Vanessa's tent, the largest of our shelters, and waited for dawn with flashlights clutched in white-knuckled hands. Vanessa tried to maintain a rational explanation. Perhaps locals were playing tricks on tourists, or maybe a disturbed individual was living in the forest, but her theories sounded hollow even to her own ears. Outside, the rain continued its relentless assault, but now other sounds mingled with it. rustling movements that circled our tent, the snap of twigs under substantial weight, and most disturbing of all, a low humming that rose and fell like someone trying to remember a half-forgotten tune. Morning couldn't come fast enough, but when the darkness finally began to lift, it brought little relief. The rain had stopped, but a thick mist had taken its place, reducing visibility to just a few feet beyond our tent. When we finally worked up the courage to emerge, we found our campsite transformed. The ground was covered in the spiral symbols, drawn in the mud every few feet, creating a labyrinth around our tents. Our camping stove and food supplies had vanished entirely, but the most horrifying discovery came when we realized Derek was missing. His sleeping bag lay empty, the tent zipper open from the inside. There was no sign of a struggle, nothing to indicate he hadn't simply walked off into the forest in the middle of the night. We called his name until our voices grew hoarse, but the mist swallowed our shouts, returning only eerie echoes that seemed to mock our efforts. Marcus suggested he might have headed back to the ranger station alone, driven by fear, but we all knew Derek wouldn't have abandoned us, and certainly not without taking any of his gear. The decision to break camp and leave was unanimous and urgent. We stuffed our sleeping bags and personal items into our packs with frantic speed, abandoning anything that wasn't essential. Vanessa insisted we stick to the main trail no matter what, even if it seemed to be leading us in circles again. "Whatever's happening," she said grimly, "I think it wants us disoriented and separated." The thought that had been growing in my mind, that we were being hunted by something that didn't operate by natural laws, was now impossible to ignore. We'd been hiking for maybe 20 minutes when Eliza stopped abruptly, pointing to something ahead in the mist. At first, I thought it was Derek, and my heart leapt with relief. But as the figure became clearer, that relief curdled into horror. It was roughly human-shaped but wrong in ways that my mind struggled to process. Too tall, too thin, its proportions distorted like a reflection in a warped mirror. It stood motionless on the trail ahead, and though I couldn't make out any features in the mist, I felt with sickening certainty that it was watching us, evaluating, deciding. Marcus was the first to react, pushing past us to confront whatever stood in our path. "Who's there?" he shouted, his voice cracking with fear disguised as anger. "This isn't funny anymore." The figure remained still for a long moment before tilting its head at an impossible angle. Then it spoke, if you could call it speaking. The sound that emerged was like dozens of voices layered together, some whispering, some wailing, all of them using our names in a grotesque parody of friendly greeting. Vanessa grabbed Marcus's arm and yanked him backward. "Run," she hissed. "Not along the trail. Just run." The authority in her voice brooked no argument, and we scattered into the undergrowth, crashing through ferns and over fallen logs, the mist parting and closing around us like a living thing. I lost sight of the others almost immediately, the dense vegetation and disorienting fog separating us within seconds. Behind me, I heard Eliza scream once, a short, cut-off sound that ended with a wet gurgle that will haunt my nightmares forever. I ran blindly, branches whipping my face, mud sucking at my boots. The rational part of my brain tried to maintain some sense of direction, to head consistently downhill toward where I thought the ranger station might be. But panic overwhelmed reason, and soon I was simply fleeing, driven by animal terror, from the sound of something large moving through the forest behind me. Something that called my name in Derek's voice, then Eliza's, then in voices I'd never heard before, but somehow recognized on some primal level. When I finally burst through the tree line into a small clearing, I nearly collided with Marcus. His face was scratched and bleeding, his eyes wide with shock. "Vanessa," he gasped. It took Vanessa, right in front of me. The ground just opened up. He was babbling now, his words tumbling over each other as he described impossible things, the earth rippling like water, hands made of roots and mud. The look on Vanessa's face as she was pulled downward. I grabbed his shoulders, trying to ground him in reality, when a sound from the forest behind us made us both freeze. It was coming closer, not bothering to conceal its approach now. The mist seemed to thicken around us, and with it came that same whispering chant I'd heard earlier, now loud enough that even Marcus could hear it. The voices spoke in a language I didn't recognize, but somehow understood on a level beyond conscious thought. They were discussing us, deciding which of us would be taken next and how. And underneath it all was a sound like wet earth shifting, like roots tearing free from soil, like something ancient and patient and hungry finally rising to claim what it had been promised. "We can't stay here," I managed to say, my mouth so dry the words felt like sandpaper. Marcus nodded mutely, his eyes fixed on the treeline where the mist was now coalescing into shapes that resembled reaching hands. We backed away slowly, then turned and ran across the clearing toward what looked like another trail. Anything to put distance between us and whatever was emerging from the forest behind us. The new path was barely visible, more animal track than human trail, but it led downhill and away from the clearing, so we followed it without hesitation. The terrain became steeper, the ground slick with mud and rotting vegetation. Twice I lost my footing and slid several yards, clutching at roots and saplings to slow my descent. Marcus was just ahead of me, moving with the reckless speed of pure terror. Neither of us spoke. We were saving our breath for running and listening intently for sounds of pursuit. Behind us, the whispering had given way to a different sound, a rhythmic squelching like heavy footsteps in mud, but too many of them, too oddly spaced to belong to anything with a conventional number of limbs. The sound was getting louder, closing the distance we'd managed to put between ourselves and it. Marcus glanced back, his face contorting with fresh horror at whatever he saw. "Don't look," he gasped. "For God's sake, Thomas, don't look back." Of course I looked. I couldn't help myself. What I saw through the swirling mist defied rational explanation. A towering mass of mud and vegetation that moved with horrible purpose, its roughly humanoid shape constantly shifting and reforming. Where a face should have been, there was only a spiral pattern of sticks and stones that rotated slowly, like the iris of some monstrous eye. From its body, if you could call it that, protruded what looked like human limbs in various stages of absorption, one of which I recognized with a jolt of nausea as wearing Derek's distinctive red and black checkered shirt. The sight robbed me of all rational thought. I ran like I'd never run before, my lungs burning, my muscles screaming in protest. The trail steepened dramatically, becoming almost vertical in places. We were essentially falling downhill now, trying to control our descent just enough to avoid fatal injury. Behind us, the thing in the mist was gaining ground, moving with a speed that nothing so large and seemingly unwieldy should possess. It no longer bothered with our names or with mimicking our friends' voices. Now it simply emitted a low, anticipatory moan that seemed to vibrate through the earth beneath our feet. The trail abruptly ended at the edge of a ravine. Below, maybe 30 feet down, a swollen river churned with muddy rainwater, carrying fallen trees and debris in its powerful current. Marcus and I pulled up short, teetering at the edge, exchanging a single desperate look. There was no time to find another route. The thing from the forest was almost upon us, its massive form blocking the trail we'd just descended. "We have to jump," Marcus shouted over the roar of the water. "It's our only chance." He was right, but the prospect was terrifying. The river was moving fast, choked with hazards that could easily kill us. But the alternative was unthinkable. I nodded, and we backed up a few paces to get a running start. That's when I heard it, a sound like tearing fabric, followed by Marcus's scream. I turned to see tendrils of mud and root erupting from the ground beneath his feet, wrapping around his ankles with unnatural strength and purpose. He fell forward, his hands clawing at the earth as more tendrils emerged to envelop his legs and torso. "Run!" he screamed at me, his voice already choked with soil that seemed to be forcing its way into his mouth. "Jump, Thomas. Go." I hesitated for a fraction of a second, a moment of indecision that will haunt me for the rest of my life. Then I turned and ran, launching myself off the edge of the ravine just as I felt something cold and wet brush against the back of my neck. For a suspended moment, I was airborne, Marcus's muffled screams still echoing in my ears. Then I hit the water with bruising force, the cold shocking the breath from my lungs. The current seized me immediately, tumbling me beneath the surface. I fought my way back up, gasping for air before being sucked under again. The weight of my backpack threatened to drag me down, but I couldn't risk trying to remove it in the churning water. Instead, I focused on keeping my head above water and avoiding the deadly obstacles being swept along with me. Tree trunks, branches, and other debris that could easily knock me unconscious or pin me underwater. How long I was in that river, I can't say for certain. Time lost all meaning as I battled the current, each moment consumed by the struggle to breathe and stay alive. My world narrowed to these simple, primal concerns, the horror of what I'd witnessed temporarily pushed aside by the immediate fight for survival. Eventually, the river widened and slowed somewhat, and I managed to grab onto a fallen tree that had lodged against the bank. With the last of my strength, I pulled myself out of the water and collapsed on the muddy shore, retching and gasping. My body was battered, my clothes torn, but I was alive. As my breathing steadied and my mind cleared, I realized with a jolt that I recognized where I was, less than a mile from the main park road. Somehow, the river had carried me in a wide arc back towards civilization, a stroke of luck I still can't quite believe. I forced myself to my feet, every muscle protesting, and began to stagger through the woods toward where I hoped the road would be. The rain had started again, a gentle patter compared to the deluge of the previous days, but each drop that hit my skin made me flinch, imagining it carrying the essence of the thing that had taken my friends. The forest around me seemed ordinary now, the ancient trees and lush ferns merely components of a natural ecosystem rather than elements of some malevolent consciousness. But I didn't trust this appearance of normality, not anymore. When I finally reached the road, I collapsed to my knees in relief. A park ranger's vehicle was approaching, probably on routine patrol. I waved frantically, half afraid the car would drive right past me, leaving me alone as night began to fall once more. But it slowed and stopped, and an older ranger stepped out, his face registering shock at my bedraggled appearance. "Son, what happened to you?" he asked, helping me to my feet. I opened my mouth to tell him everything, about the symbols, the thing in the forest, my missing friends who needed to be found, but something in his expression stopped me. It was the same look I'd seen on the face of the ranger who checked us in, that mixture of knowledge and deliberate ignorance. And I suddenly understood that he already knew, or at least suspected, what had happened to us. This wasn't the first time, and the authorities had chosen to look the other way, to let the forest keep its secrets. "My friends," I managed to say, my voice raw. "They're still out there. We need to send a search party." The ranger nodded solemnly and helped me into his vehicle, promising that a search would be organized immediately. But there was no urgency in his movements, no real concern in his voice. As he radioed into the station, I heard him use phrases like standard protocol and likely disoriented due to weather conditions. Not once did he ask me what had happened or why I was alone. As we drove toward the ranger station, the forest receding behind us, I stared out the window at the darkening trees. For just a moment, I thought I saw movement among them, something large shifting in the shadowy spaces between trunks. The ranger followed my gaze, then deliberately looked away. "The rainforest plays tricks on your mind," he said quietly, "especially after a few days of hard rain." His tone made it clear. This was the explanation I should accept, the story I should tell. Anything else would be dismissed as trauma, hallucination, or madness. I said nothing in response, but as the trees finally gave way to the cleared area around the ranger station, I made a silent promise to my friends. I would tell the truth, whatever the consequences. I would make people listen and understand what lurked in the heart of the Ho rainforest. But even as I made this vow, a small voice in the back of my mind whispered a terrible truth. No one would believe me. And worse still, part of me was already beginning to doubt my own memories, the rational portions of my brain working to reshape the horror into something I could live with. The official search for my friends lasted 3 days. 3 days of rangers and volunteers combing the rain-soaked forest, calling names that would never be answered. I wasn't allowed to participate. Doctor's orders, they said, after diagnosing me with hypothermia and severe exhaustion. Instead, I sat in a small room at the ranger station, telling my story again and again to park officials, local police, and finally FBI agents who had been called in due to the number of missing persons. With each retelling, I could see the skepticism growing in their eyes. I'd learned quickly not to mention the moving earth or the thing made of mud and vegetation. Those details were redacted from my official statement, replaced with vaguer descriptions of becoming separated in bad weather and dangerous terrain. Even so, I could tell they thought I was hiding something, perhaps something I had done to my friends. The questioning became more aggressive, more accusatory, until my hastily acquired lawyer put a stop to it. The physical evidence told its own confusing story. They found our campsite, but not as we had left it. The tents were scattered and torn, as if by animals or a violent storm. There was no sign of the spiral symbols I had described, no indication that anything unnatural had occurred there. They found pieces of equipment along the trail, Eliza's camera, Marcus's jacket, a hiking boot that had belonged to Vanessa, creating a path that suggested our group had fled in panic through the forest. But of my friends themselves, there was no trace. On the fourth day, they found Derek's body. He had washed up on the banks of the river, miles downstream from where I had pulled myself out. The official cause of death was drowning, but the coroner's report noted unusual post-mortem details that were never fully explained to me. I wasn't allowed to see him, to say goodbye to my cousin who had come on this trip seeking healing and found only horror instead. His parents, my aunt and uncle, couldn't look me in the eye at the funeral. They never said it aloud, but I could read the accusation in their silence. Why did you survive when our son didn't? In the months that followed, the searches continued intermittently, but with diminishing resources and expectations. The case became another entry in the disturbingly long list of disappearances in national parks across the country. Theories abounded: serial killers, wild animal attacks, accidental falls into undiscovered caves or ravines. The most popular explanation, leaked by someone involved in the investigation, was that our group had experimented with hallucinogenic mushrooms found in the forest, leading to mass panic and tragic, separate accidents. I tried to counter these narratives, to tell the truth of what had happened in those woods. I wrote detailed accounts, created a website, even attempted to interest journalists in the story. But the more I insisted on the supernatural elements of our experience, the easier it became for others to dismiss me as traumatized, delusional, or attention-seeking. Eventually, even I began to question my memories. Could it have been a psychotic break triggered by extreme stress? Could the symbols, the whispering, the thing in the mist have been manifestations of my own troubled mind? A year to the day after the incident, I received a small package in the mail. It contained a single item, a spiral symbol made of twigs and mud, now dried and hardened. There was no note, no return address. I took it to the police, who made a perfunctory report but suggested it was likely sent by someone who had read about my claims online and was playing a cruel prank. I didn't believe that explanation, but I couldn't prove otherwise. That night, as rain lashed against my apartment windows in Seattle, I sat staring at the symbol, feeling it pull at something deep in my consciousness. Almost without realizing what I was doing, I found myself researching the Olympic Peninsula, looking at maps of the Hoh rainforest, planning a return trip. Some part of me felt drawn back to those ancient woods, as if unfinished business awaited me there. It was only when I caught myself whispering the same chant I'd heard in the forest, a sound I shouldn't have been able to replicate, that I snapped out of the trance. I destroyed the symbol that night, burning it in my kitchen sink and flushing the ashes down the drain. I deleted my research, canceled my rental car reservation, and called my therapist for an emergency session. But the pull remains, strongest when it rains heavily. Sometimes I wake in the night to find mud on my sheets and my shoes by the door, though I have no memory of going outside. And always, there's the whispering at the edges of my hearing, calling me back to the rain forest where my friends were taken. I'm moving away from Washington next week, heading for the desert Southwest where rain is scarce and forests are sparse. I don't know if distance will break whatever connection was forged in those woods, but I have to try. Because the most disturbing realization, the one I've been avoiding until now, is that I didn't escape that day by luck or chance. I was allowed to leave. I was meant to survive and tell this story, to spread knowledge of what dwells in the Hoh rainforest, to serve as a lure for others. So I'm breaking the cycle with this final account. If you're reading this, please heed my warning. Stay away from the Hoh rainforest, especially during the rainy season. Don't dismiss the local legends or the warnings of those who seem to know more than they're willing to say. And if you're camping and find spiral symbols around your site, leave immediately. Don't pack up, don't collect your gear, just run. Because the thing that took my friends is still there, patient and ancient, waiting for the next group of visitors who dismiss the whispers as just the sound of rain on leaves, who explain away the unease as normal apprehension in an unfamiliar wilderness. It's waiting for those who, like us, make the deadly mistake of believing that the only dangers in nature are those we can name and understand. And when it finds them, it will remember the taste of fear and confusion, the satisfaction of the hunt, and the pleasure of adding new voices to its chorus. The rain is getting heavier now. I think I'll close the windows. The rain is getting heavier now. I think I'll close the windows. Hey, so I'm going to tell you about the worst camping trip of my life. My name's Elliot James Carter. I've got 29 years old, and I live in Seattle, Washington. Rain's pretty much my roommate there, but I'm used to it. Kinda comes with the territory. Anyway, this whole mess started when I decided to get out of the city for a bit. Work was grinding me down, and I figured a few days in the woods would fix me right up. Olympic National Park was the spot, about a 3-hour drive, all misty forests and dripping trees. Sounded peaceful, right? Yeah, I thought so too. I didn't go alone though. My buddy Nate, Nathaniel Paul Grayson, 31, from Tacoma, was all in for it. He's the outdoorsy type, always bragging about how he could live off the land if he had to. Then there was Claire Marie Delgado, 27, also from Seattle. She's my coworker, sharp as a tack, but not exactly the roughing it type. She only tagged along cause I promised her a chill weekend with esmores and zero stress. Famous last words, huh? We packed up my beat-up Jeep with gear, tents, sleeping bags, a cooler full of beer and snacks, and hit the road. The rain was already coming down in sheets by the time we left Seattle, wipers slapping against the windshield like they were mad at me. I remember cracking a joke about how we'd be camping in a swamp, and Nate just laughed, saying it'd make us tougher. Claire rolled her eyes and plugged in her earbuds. Typical. The drive out to Olympic was kinda hypnotic. Gray skies, wet asphalt, and those endless evergreens looming like they were watching us. We got to the trailhead around dusk, and man, that rain wasn't letting up. Everything was soaked, the air heavy with that earthy, damp smell. I popped the trunk, and we started unloading, already bickering about who'd carry what. Nate grabbed the heaviest pack like it was nothing, while Claire whined about her boots getting muddy 5 steps in. We hiked about a mile into the forest to this little clearing Nate swore was perfect. By then, it was dark, and the rain was drumming on our hoods. Setting up the tents was a nightmare. Wet nylon slipping through my fingers, stakes barely holding in the mushy ground. I kept thinking how this was supposed to be relaxing, but I was too stubborn to call it quits. Claire was shivering, muttering about how she should have stayed home with Netflix, and I couldn't really argue. Finally, we got the tents up, and Nate built a fire. Don't ask me how he managed that in the downpour. We huddled around it, the flames spitting and hissing as the rain tried to kill it. The woods were quiet, aside from the constant drip 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 on the leaves. I remember feeling this weird chill, not just from the cold, but like something was off. I brushed it off as exhaustion, though, city boy nerves, right? Nate started telling some dumb story about his last camping trip, how he'd seen a bear or whatever, and Claire was half listening, texting her sister cause she still had a bar of signal. I just stared into the fire, letting the heat dry my hands, thinking how this was going to be a good reset. The rain kept pounding, a steady curtain around us, and I figured it'd be fine once we got some sleep. Looking back, I should have paid more attention to that creepy feeling, you know? Like when you're a kid and you swear something's under your bed, but you're too scared to check. Yeah, that's where I was at, sitting there with my soggy socks and my dumb optimism. We crashed in our tents that night, rain hammering the fabric, and I told myself it'd all look better in the morning. But that's the thing about horror stories. They don't care what you tell yourself. So, morning hit, and let me tell you, it didn't look better. I woke up to the sound of rain still slapping the tent like it had a personal grudge. My sleeping bag was damp. Don't even ask how that happened. And my back ached from the lumpy ground. I unzipped the flap and peeked out, half expecting some postcard-worthy forest view. Nope, just gray mist, wet trees, and a soggy fire pit. Olympic National Park was giving us the full rainy horror treatment, and I was already over it. Nate was up, poking at the ashes like he could resurrect last night's fire. Rough night, huh? He said, grinning like this was all a big adventure. I grumbled something about coffee and stumbled out, my boots squishing in the mud. Claire crawled out of her tent a minute later, looking like she'd aged 10 years overnight. "This is not what you promised, Elliot," she said, glaring at me. I just shrugged. What was I supposed to do? Turn off the rain? We tried to get breakfast going, but the stove wouldn't light. Wet fuel or something. Nate swore he could fix it, fiddling with it while I dug through the cooler for anything edible. Cold hot dogs it was. Claire refused to touch them, opting for a granola bar she'd stashed, and I couldn't blame her. The vibe was off, you know? Like we were all pretending this wasn't a disaster waiting to happen. Then came the first real problem. Nate noticed the trail markers were gone. We'd followed these little wooden stakes in last night, but now? Nothing. Probably washed away, he said, all casual, like it wasn't a big deal. I felt my stomach twist. We weren't deep in the wilderness or anything, but losing the path in this rain wasn't exactly comforting. Claire freaked a little, saying we should pack up and go, but Nate waved her off. We're fine. I've got a map. That map, though? Soaked. The ink had bled into a blurry mess, and Nate's "I've got this" attitude was starting to crack. We argued for a good 20 minutes, Claire pushing to leave, me stuck in the middle, and Nate insisting we could tough it out. I finally sided with him, mostly because I didn't want to admit defeat so soon. Big mistake, but I'll get to that. We decided to hike a bit, see if we could find the trail again. The rain was relentless, soaking through my jacket, turning every step into a slog. I kept slipping, cursing under my breath, while Nate marched ahead like some soggy Boy Scout. Claire trailed behind, muttering about how this was the dumbest idea ever. She wasn't wrong, but I wasn't about to say it out loud. About an hour in, things got disturbing. We found this old campsite, abandoned, tent half collapsed, gear scattered like whoever was there left in a hurry. A sleeping bag was tangled in a bush, soaked and mildewed, and there was a shoe, just one, stuck in the mud. Weird, Nate said, kicking at it. I didn't like it. Felt too much like one of those scary movies where the dumb hikers stumble into trouble. I tried to shake it off, but then Claire pointed out something worse, a little pile of bones near the fire ring. Small, maybe a rabbit or something, but picked clean. Probably an animal, Nate said, but his voice wasn't as steady as before. I nodded, acting like I agreed, but deep down, I wasn't so sure. The rain kept pouring, blurring everything, and I couldn't shake this creepy feeling creeping up my spine. We kept going, telling ourselves it was nothing, just some old trash from careless campers. But that abandoned site stuck with me, gnawing at the back of my mind. The woods felt heavier now, like they were holding their breath, waiting for something. And us? We were just dumb enough to keep walking right into it. So, we kept trudging through that soggy mess of a forest, rain hammering down like it wanted us gone. My boots were soaked through, my jeans clinging to my legs, and every step felt like wading through quicksand. Nate was still up front, acting like he knew where we were going, but I could tell he was guessing now. Claire was quiet, too quiet, staring at the ground like she was counting the puddles. That abandoned campsite was still rattling around in my head, making everything feel a little too horror movie-ish for comfort. We hit this little ravine, steep and slick with mud, and Nate decided we'd cross it. Shortcut, he said, like that was supposed to make me feel better. I slipped halfway down, scraping my knee on a rock, and let out a string of curses that'd make a sailor blush. Claire snapped at me to keep it together, but her voice was shaky. She was rattled too. We made it across, barely, and that's when I noticed the air felt wrong. Heavy, thick, like it was pressing on my chest. Then we saw it, a shape up ahead, half hidden in the mist. At first, I thought it was a tree, just some gnarled trunk playing tricks on me. But it moved. Slow, deliberate, stepping out from the shadows of the dripping pines. It was tall, too tall, hunched over like it didn't want to be seen. Skinny limbs, pale and wet, glinting in the faint light. I froze, my breath catching, and whispered, "Nate, you seeing this?" He nodded, real slow, like he didn't want to spook it. Or us. Claire whimpered, grabbing my arm so tight it hurt. "What the hell is that?" she hissed. I didn't have an answer. It wasn't a bear, wasn't a person, not really. It turned its head, and I swear, even through the rain, I saw eyes. Big, hollow, locked right on us. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it'd bust out of my chest. "Nate, Mr. Tough Guy," finally cracked. "We need to move," he said, voice low and urgent. We backed up, trying not to trip over roots or each other. But that thing, it started following. Not fast, not chasing, just keeping pace. Like it was curious. Or hungry. The rain made it hard to see, but I caught flashes, long fingers, matted hair plastered to its skull, a mouth that didn't look right. This wasn't some hiker or animal. This was something scary, something straight outta a nightmare. We ducked behind a cluster of trees, crouching low, barely breathing. It stopped, maybe 20 yards off, just standing there in the downpour. I could hear Claire's teeth chattering, and Nate was gripping his stick like it'd do any good. "What do we do?" I whispered, my voice sounding small against the roar of the rain. Nobody answered, 'cause nobody knew. My mind was racing. Maybe it was a trick, like those stories about people going nuts in the woods. But those eyes, they weren't human. It took a step closer, and that's when we heard the sound. Not the rain, not the wind, but a low, guttural rasp. Like it was trying to talk, or laugh, or something worse. My skin crawled, and I felt this disturbing certainty that we'd walked into its turf. Nate muttered something about circling back to camp, but I wasn't sure we could even find it anymore. The forest felt bigger now, twisted, like it was shifting around us. Claire started crying, quiet little sobs, and I couldn't blame her. I was terrified too, every instinct screaming at me to run. But where? That thing was between us and the way we'd come, and the ravine was behind us. We were stuck, pinned in this rainy hell with something that didn't belong here. Or maybe we didn't. It tilted its head, like it was listening, and I swear I felt it looking right through me. I don't know how long we stayed there, crouched and shaking, but it didn't leave. It just watched, waiting, like it had all the time in the world. And us? We were running out of hours, fast. So there we were, crouched in the mud, rain pounding us like it was trying to bury us alive. That thing, whatever it was, just stood there, staring through the mist with those hollow eyes. My legs were screaming to run, but my brain was stuck, spinning like a busted tire. Nate finally hissed, "We gotta move, now." And I didn't argue. We bolted, scrambling back toward the ravine, slipping and sliding like a bunch of idiots in a horror flick. The ground was a nightmare, wet roots snagging my boots, mud sucking me down. Claire tripped, and I yanked her up so hard I nearly dislocated her arm. She was sobbing, full-on panic mode, and I couldn't blame her. That raspy sound followed us, closer now, like it was done playing coy. I glanced back, just once, and saw it loping after us, long limbs cutting through the rain. My heart was a jackhammer, and I knew we were in deep, scary shit. We hit the ravine, and Nate yelled to climb it. Our only shot. The slope was a slick mess, hands clawing at dirt that crumbled away. I pushed Claire ahead, her shoes kicking mud in my face, while Nate hauled himself up like a damn spider. I heard that thing behind me, too close, and I swear I felt its breath, cold, rancid, brushing my neck. I scrambled faster, nails splitting, lungs burning, pure terror driving me up. Halfway up, Claire screamed. Her foot slipped, and she slid back, crashing into me. We tumbled, a tangle of limbs, and I hit a rock hard enough to see stars. She landed beside me, gasping, and I saw it. Right at the bottom, reaching up with those bony fingers. "Go!" I shouted, shoving her. Nate leaned down, grabbed her wrist, and pulled, while I kicked at the mud, clawing my way back up. My hands were bloody, but I didn't care. Life or death, man. We made it over the lip, collapsing in a heap, sucking air like we'd forgotten how to breathe. The rain was a roar, drowning out everything, but I couldn't hear that rasp anymore. I peeked over the edge, nothing, just shadows and water. "It's gone." I panted, but Nate shook his head, wild-eyed. "We need to keep moving." He was right. That thing wasn't done with us, not by a long shot. We ran, or staggered, really, through the woods, no clue where we were going. The rain blurred everything, trees looming like they were closing in. My mind was a mess, flashing to those bones we'd found, that abandoned camp. Was this what got them? I pushed it down, focused on moving. Claire was limping, Nate's shirt was torn, and I felt like I'd aged a decade. But we kept going, desperate to get out of this disturbing trap. After what felt like hours, we stumbled onto a stream, wide, rushing, swollen from the rain. "Cross it," Nate said, like it was that simple. It was chest deep, freezing, and the current nearly swept me off my feet. I grabbed a branch, held on for dear life, and helped Claire across. Nate followed, slipping once but catching himself. On the other side, we collapsed, soaked and shaking, praying the water would stop that thing. I don't know if it worked, but we didn't see it again, not then. The forest was quiet, just the rain and our ragged breathing. We were alive, somehow, but lost as hell. My phone was dead, Claire's too, and Nate's map was long gone. We huddled under a tree, shivering, trying to figure out what to do next. I kept waiting for those eyes to pop up, that rasp to cut through the storm. Every snap of a twig had us jumping, every gust of wind feeling like a threat. We'd gotten away, for now, but I couldn't shake the feeling we'd just pissed it off. And out here, in this rainy, endless maze, that was the last thing we needed. We sat there by that stream, wet to the bone, trying to catch our breath and not lose our minds. The rain wasn't letting up, figures, right? And the cold was seeping in deep, making my hands shake like I was some old geezer. Nate kept saying we had to find the trailhead, get back to the Jeep, but I could barely think straight. Claire was a wreck, hugging her knees, muttering about how she just wanted to go home. I did too, but home felt a million miles away. We started moving again, picking a direction. West, Nate guessed, cause of the moss or some crap he remembered from scouts. The forest was a soggy blur, every tree looking the same, and my legs were lead. I kept replaying that chase in my head, those long fingers, that awful sound. It was horror on repeat, and I couldn't turn it off. We were idiots for coming here, for thinking we could handle this place. Hours dragged on, and we found a ridge, steep, but it gave us a view. Through the mist, I spotted headlights, faint and far off. The road. I yelled, hope kicking in. We scrambled down, slipping and cursing, but it was something to aim for. My knee was screaming from the fall earlier, but I didn't care. Freedom was close. Claire even cracked a weak smile, like maybe we'd make it out of this nightmare. We hit flat ground, and there it was, a gravel road, slick with rain but real. No Jeep in sight, but we'd figure that out later. Nate took the lead, walking fast, and I hobbled after him, Claire at my side. The headlights were gone, but we kept going, figuring civilization had to be close. I was so focused on that, I didn't notice Nate slowing down, staring at something up ahead. Elliot, he said, voice tight, look. I squinted through the rain, a shape on the road. Our Jeep. Relief hit me like a truck, but then I saw it. The hood was up, tires slashed, windows smashed. My stomach dropped. What the hell? Claire whispered, stepping back. That's when I heard it again. That rasp, low and close, cutting through the storm like a knife. We'd made a deadly mistake, thinking we'd escaped. It came out of the trees, faster this time. No stalking, just charging. Those eyes locked on us, and I screamed. Pure, raw terror. Nate swung a branch, but it snapped like a twig against that thing's arm. It grabbed him, lifted him like he weighed nothing, and I heard a crack. His neck, I think. He went limp, and it tossed him aside, blood mixing with the rain. Claire bolted, and I tried to follow, but my knee gave out. I hit the ground, crawling, sobbing, as it loomed over me. Claire's screams echoed, then cut off, sharp, final. I didn't look back. I dragged myself toward the Jeep, hands slipping on gravel, praying for a miracle. The rasp was right behind me, and I felt it, cold fingers brushing my leg. I kicked, rolled, and somehow got under the Jeep, curling up tight, holding my breath. It stayed there, pacing, sniffing, like it knew I was close. The rain hid my tears, my gasps, as I waited, trapped in this disturbing limbo. Hours later, maybe minutes, I don't know, it left. Silence, just the storm. I crawled out, saw Nate's body twisted on the road, Claire's nowhere in sight. The Jeep wouldn't start, and I was alone, bleeding, lost in Olympics rainy hell. I don't know how I got out of there. Walked, maybe, till a ranger found me days later, half dead. They said I was lucky, but they didn't see what I saw. That thing's still out there, and I'm never going back. Never. I've got to tell you about this camping trip that went straight to hell. My name's Riley June Harper. I've got 34 years old, and I live in Spokane, Washington. Out there, it's all dry plains and sunshine half the year, but I was itching for something different, something wet, green, and wild. Work had me burned out, staring at spreadsheets till my eyes crossed, so I figured a getaway to North Cascades National Park would shake things loose. Big mistake, but I'll get to that. I roped in a couple of friends for this disaster. There's Jasper Lee Monroe, 36, from Bellingham. He's a mechanic, all grease-stained hands and chill vibes, always up for an adventure. Then there's Mara Elise Tran, 30, from Spokane too. She's my neighbor, a nurse with a sharp tongue and zero patience for nonsense. I pitched it as a long weekend of hiking and campfire vibes, and they were in. Who doesn't love a little rain-soaked bonding, right? We loaded up Jasper's old pickup, tents, a beat-up cooler, some tarps to fight the inevitable downpour, and peeled out of Spokane. The drive to North Cascades is a haul, like 4 hours, and the weather turned nasty fast. Rain started tapping the windshield before we even hit the mountains, and by the time we rolled into the park, it was a full-on deluge. I cracked a joke about needing gills, and Mara just snorted, "You owe me for this, Riley." We pulled into a trailhead near Diablo Lake. Gorgeous spot, all misty water and jagged peaks, even in the gloom. The plan was to hike in a couple miles, set up camp, and just soak in the wilderness. Well, soak we did literally. The rain was relentless, turning the trail into a sloppy mess. Jasper took point, hauling the biggest pack, while Mara grumbled about her soggy sneakers. Me? I was just trying not to eat dirt every 5 steps. By the time we found a decent clearing, it was late afternoon, and the light was fading fast behind those thick, wet clouds. Setting up camp was a circus, tarps flapping like crazy, tent poles slipping out of my hands. Jasper cursed up a storm when a stake snapped, and Mara flat out refused to help till we promised her coffee later. The rain drummed on everything, loud and steady, like it was laughing at us. We finally got the tent standing and a fire going. Jasper's a wizard with damp wood, I swear. We huddled under a tarp, passing around a thermos of lukewarm coffee, and I tried to play it cool, like this was all part of the fun. The forest was quiet, just that constant drip on the leaves, and it felt heavy, you know, like we weren't alone, but I chalked it up to being a city girl out of her depth. Jasper started yapping about some fishing trip he'd taken last summer, and Mara was half listening, sketching in a little notebook she'd brought. I just stared into the flames, letting the heat dry my face, thinking how this was going to be my big reset. Rain or not, I was determined to make it work. We crashed early, tents shaking in the wind, and I fell asleep to that endless patter, feeling kinda smug about roughing it. Looking back, I should have caught that weird vibe sooner, like when you walk into a room and everyone stops talking. It was subtle, buried under the rain and the exhaustion, but it was there. I was too busy playing pioneer to notice, though, and that's where it all started sliding sideways. North Cascades had plans for us, and they weren't the chill kind. I woke up to the sound of rain still hammering the tent like it was mad at me personally. My sleeping bag was clammy, my neck stiff from the ground, and I was seriously questioning my life choices. I poked my head out, and North Cascades was serving up a big OL plate of gray. Mist everywhere, trees dripping, the whole works. I muttered something about coffee and crawled out, my boots sinking into the muck. This was not the Zen getaway I'd sold to Jasper and Mara. Jasper was already up, trying to coax the fire back to life with wet sticks. "Sleep okay, princess?" he teased, smirking. I flipped him off and started digging through our soggy gear for breakfast. Mara stumbled out a minute later, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. "This is your fault, Riley," she said, pointing at me like I'd invented rain. We managed some oatmeal, lumpy and cold, cause the stove was acting up, and the mood was sour as the weather. Then the real fun started. Jasper noticed our water jug was leaking, cracked somehow, probably from the hike in. Half our supply was gone, soaked into the dirt. "Great," Mara groaned. "We're gonna die of thirst in a freaking monsoon." Jasper shrugged it off, saying we could boil stream water, but I wasn't thrilled about drinking anything from this creepy place. The rain was making everything harder, and I could feel the tension creeping in. We decided to hike out a bit, scope the area, maybe find a better spot with less mud. Big mistake number 1. The trail was a sloppy mess, and within 10 minutes, we realized the markers were fading, paint peeling off, half the posts knocked over. "Storm must have hit hard," Jasper said, but his voice had an edge. Mara wanted to turn back right then, but I pushed us forward. Dumb, I know, but I didn't want to admit defeat yet. The forest was a slog, branches smacking my face, water running down my neck. Jasper kept slipping, cursing louder each time, while Mara trailed behind, silent but pissed. We stopped at this little overlook, Diablo Lake shimmering below, all eerie and still despite the rain. That's when I saw it. A pile of gear, abandoned, tangled in the bushes. A backpack, ripped open, some clothes scattered, wet, moldy, like it had been there a while. Who leaves their stuff like that? I said, trying to laugh it off. Jasper kicked at a soggy shirt, frowning. Maybe they bailed in a hurry. Mara didn't say anything, just stared at it, her face tight. Then she pointed, tracks in the mud, deep and weird, not quite human. Too big, too spaced out. Bear? I asked, but Jasper shook his head. Not like any bear I've seen. My stomach did a little flip, something about it felt off, disturbing even, but I told myself it was nothing. Woods are weird, right? We kept going, pretending it didn't faze us, but the vibe was shifting. The rain seemed louder, the trees closer, like they were leaning in. I caught Jasper glancing over his shoulder more than once, and Mara was clutching her little knife. You know, the one she keeps for emergencies. I tried to crack a joke about Bigfoot, but it fell flat, and nobody laughed. By the time we looped back to camp, we were soaked and jumpy. The fire was dead, our tents sagging under the water weight. I couldn't shake that pile of gear from my mind. Those tracks, that creepy feeling. Jasper started rigging up a better tarp setup, muttering about staying dry, while Mara just sat there, staring into the woods. You feel that? She said finally. I didn't want to admit it, but yeah, I did. Something watching, waiting. It was like the rain was hiding it, whatever it was. We were stuck out here, half lost, and I was starting to think this trip was a bigger mistake than I'd realized. The North Cascades were alive, and not in a friendly way. So, night fell, and the rain didn't quit. It just got meaner, pounding the tarp like it wanted in. We were huddled under it, trying to eat some jerky and stay warm, but the chill was bone deep. Jasper was fiddling with a lantern, casting shaky light around, while Mara kept that knife in her lap, eyes darting to the trees. I was pretending everything was fine, but my gut was screaming that something was seriously wrong out here. Then it happened. Movement, just beyond the light. I thought it was a deer at first, a quick blur in the shadows, but it stopped, and I saw it clear as day. Tall, way too tall, hunched over like it was trying to fit under the branches. Skinny, pale, glistening wet, arms hanging low, almost brushing the ground. My breath caught, and I grabbed Jasper's arm. You see that? I whispered. He nodded, slow, like he didn't want to believe it. Mara sucked in a gasp, clutching her knife tighter. What the fuck is that, Riley? She hissed. I didn't know, couldn't know. It wasn't a person, wasn't an animal. It turned, and I saw its face. Gaunt, stretched, with these dark pits where eyes should have been. My heart slammed against my ribs, pure horror kicking in. Jasper swore under his breath, fumbling for a stick, anything to hold on to. It stepped closer, deliberate, like it was testing us. The rain made it hard to hear, but there was this sound, a wet, rattling wheeze, like it was breathing through a broken throat. I felt sick, dizzy, like the world was tilting. We need to go, Jasper said, voice cracking, and I didn't argue. We grabbed our packs, hands shaking, and backed away, keeping it in sight. Those pit eyes followed us, unblinking. We bolted, stumbling through the mud, branches clawing at us. It didn't chase, not right away, just watched, head cocked like we were some kind of puzzle. My mind was racing, flashing to those tracks, that gear. Was this what got them? I tripped, caught myself on a tree, and felt the bark splinter under my nails. Mara was ahead, panting, while Jasper kept yelling at us to move faster. We hit a slope, steep and slick, and slid down, crashing into each other at the bottom. I looked back. It was there, at the top, staring down. Then it moved, fast, loping down the hill like gravity didn't matter. That wheeze turned into a growl, low and guttural, and I knew we were in deep, scary trouble. Run, I screamed, and we did, tearing through the woods, rain blinding us. It was gaining. I could feel it, that cold, wrong presence closing in. We dodged trees, slipped on rocks, desperation driving us. Mara yelped as her ankle twisted, but she kept going, limping hard. Jasper grabbed her arm, pulling her along, and I stayed close, heart pounding so loud I couldn't think. The forest felt alive, twisted, like it was helping that thing hunt us. We ducked into a thicket, thorns snagging my jacket, and crouched low, barely breathing. It stopped, maybe 30 feet away, sniffing the air. Up close, it was worse, skin like wet leather, mouth gaping with jagged teeth. My stomach churned, terror locking my joints. Jasper whispered, "What do we do?" But I had nothing. My brain was blank, just raw fear. It lingered, swaying slightly, like it was listening to the rain, or us. Then it turned, slow, and started pacing the edge of the thicket. It knew we were there, and it wasn't leaving. We were trapped, soaked, and staring down something straight out of a nightmare, with no clue how to get out of this alive. So, there we were, hunkered down in that thorny thicket, rain soaking us through while that thing prowled just outside. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it had bust out of my chest, and I could barely hear over the downpour. Jasper was gripping Mara's arm, her face twisted in pain from her ankle, and I was trying not to puke from sheer terror. That wheezy growl was close, too close, and those pit eyes seemed to glow in the dark, hunting us. "We can't stay here," Jasper whispered, his voice shaking. He was right. That thing was circling, waiting us out. I nodded, and we crawled, slow and quiet, thorns ripping at my hands. The rain masked our noise, but every snap of a twig felt like a gunshot. It stopped pacing, head snapping toward us, and I froze, breath stuck in my throat. Then it lunged, and we bolted, pure panic kicking in. The forest was a blur, mud, trees, water everywhere. I slipped, slammed into a trunk, and scrambled up, lungs burning. Mara was hobbling bad, leaning on Jasper, and I could hear that thing crashing through behind us. It wasn't quiet now, full-on charging, snapping branches like they were nothing. I grabbed a rock, chucked it sideways, hoping to distract it. No clue if it worked, but I kept running, legs screaming. We hit a riverbank. Fast, swollen, roaring from the rain. "Cross it," Jasper yelled, and we waded in, ice-cold water hitting my waist. The current yanked at me, nearly swept me off, but I grabbed Mara's pack, hauling her with me. Jasper was ahead, fighting the flow, and I saw that thing reach the edge, hesitating, maybe. My boots slipped on rocks, water up to my chest, but we made it, collapsing on the other side, gasping. I looked back. It was gone, swallowed by the rain and mist. Did we lose it? Mara panted, clutching her ankle. Jasper shook his head, scanning the trees. "Don't count on it." We were soaked, freezing, and lost as hell, but alive, for now. My hands were bloody from the thorns, my knees aching, but I didn't care. We staggered up, picking a direction, praying it'd lead us out. The woods were a maze, every step a slog through mud and puddles. My mind was spinning, those teeth, that growl, like something out of a scary movie gone real. We kept moving, silent except for our ragged breathing, jumping at every rustle. Hours blurred together, rain never letting up, and I started thinking we'd never find the trailhead, just wander till that thing caught us. Then lights, faint, flickering through the trees. "Rangers," I croaked, hope flickering. We pushed toward it, stumbling over roots, and broke into a clearing, a road, gravel shining wet. Jasper hooped, but it died fast. No truck, no people, just tire tracks fading into the muck. We'd gotten away, maybe, but we were still deep in this horror show, and I couldn't shake the feeling it wasn't over. We followed the road, limping along, rain blurring everything. My phone was toast, Mara's too, and Jasper's was somewhere back in the chaos. We were beat up, scared senseless, and clinging to the idea that civilization was close. Every shadow had me flinching, every gust of wind sounding like that wheeze. I kept telling myself we'd made it, that the river stopped it, but deep down, I wasn't sure. The North Cascades felt alive, angry, and we'd pissed off something that didn't let go easy. We were still running, even if we didn't know it yet. We trudged down that gravel road, rain pounding us like it wanted us dead. My legs were jelly, Mara was barely walking, and Jasper kept muttering about finding the truck. We were a mess, wet, bloody, and running on fumes. I couldn't stop picturing those pit eyes, that jagged mouth. It was horror stuck on loop, and I just wanted out, back to Spokane, dry and safe. Fat chance, huh? We spotted the trailhead sign, bent, rusted, but there. Relief hit me hard, until I saw the parking lot. Jasper's truck was trashed, windows smashed, but popped, like something big had taken a swing at it. "What the hell?" he said, kicking a tire that was flat as a pancake. My stomach sank. This wasn't random. That thing had been here. Mara started crying, quiet and shaky, and I didn't know what to say. "Let's just walk," I said, voice hoarse. "Find help," Jasper nodded, but he was pale, eyes darting to the trees. We started down the road, sticking close, every step feeling like a countdown. The rain hid everything, sounds, shapes, and I kept waiting for that wheeze to cut through. We'd made a deadly mistake, thinking we could outrun it, thinking the river was enough. It hit us fast. 1 second, we were hobbling along. The next, that thing burst out of the woods, right in front of us. Taller than I remembered, dripping wet, teeth glinting. Jasper shoved Mara behind him, swinging a branch he'd picked up. It didn't even flinch, snapped the wood and grabbed him, claws sinking in. He screamed, blood spraying, and I yanked Mara back, yelling at her to run. She froze, eyes wide, and I dragged her, my own panic blinding me. Jasper's screams turned wet, then stopped. Too quick, too final. I didn't look, couldn't, just kept pulling Mara down the road. That growl was behind us, steady, like it was toying with us now. My lungs burned, my vision blurred with rain and tears, and Mara's ankle gave out. She fell, hard, and I tried to lift her. "Riley, go," she sobbed, pushing me off. I hesitated, worst mistake of my life. It was on her in a flash, claws slashing, and I ran, coward that I am. Her screams chased me, sharp and awful, then silence. I kept going, stumbling, sobbing, till I hit pavement, a real road. Headlights flared, a car swerved, and some guy jumped out, yelling at me. I collapsed, babbling about monsters, blood, my friends. Rangers found me later, half dead, raving like a lunatic. They searched, but Jasper and Mara were gone. No bodies, just scraps of clothes, blood washed away by the rain. They said it was a bear, maybe a cougar, but I saw those eyes, those teeth. I know what got them. Back in Spokane now, I don't sleep. Every raindrop sounds like it's coming for me. That thing's still out there, in the North Cascades, waiting. I left my friends to die, and it let me live. Maybe to tell this story, maybe to suffer. Either way, it's a tragedy I'll carry forever, and I'm never stepping foot in those woods again. I've got 32 years old, and I live in Tacoma, Washington. It's a gritty little city, lots of coffee shops, shipyards, and drizzle, but I needed a break from the daily grind. Mount Rainier National Park sounded like the ticket, you know? Big mountains, fresh air, a chance to unplug. Famous last words, right? I didn't go solo, dragged a couple pals along for the ride. There's Lena Rose Carter, 29, from Olympia. She's an artist, all free spirit energy, always sketching stuff on napkins. Then there's Owen Jude Fletcher, 33, from Tacoma too. He's my old high school buddy, a carpenter with a loud laugh and a thing for ghost stories. I pitched it as a quick escape, 3 days of tents and trails, and they were game. Should have known better. We piled into Owen's van, rattly old thing, packed with gear, snacks, and a tarp or two cause rain's a given around here. The drive to Rainier's about an hour and a half, and the weather was already turning sour, gray clouds rolling in, wipers thumping. I joked about how we'd be swimming by nightfall, and Lena just grinned, saying it'd inspire her next painting. Owen cranked the radio, singing off-key, and it felt like a solid start. We hit the park entrance around noon, Mount Rainier looming huge and misty through the windshield. The rain was light then, just a sprinkle, but the forecast promised worse. We grabbed our packs and hiked in from the Longmire trailhead, about 2 miles to a spot Owen swore was perfect. The trail was slick, pine needles sticking to my boots, and I could smell that damp, earthy vibe kicking in. By the time we reached the clearing, the rain was picking up, pattering on the leaves like a drum roll. Setting up camp was a wrestling match. Wet tarps flapping, stakes slipping in the mud. Lena cursed when her tent pole snapped, and Owen laughed till she chucked a pine cone at him. I was soaked through, but I kept grinning, determined to make this work. Took us an hour, but we got it. 2 tents, a fire pit, the whole deal. Owen got a fire going somehow. Guy's a miracle worker with soggy wood, and we huddled around it, passing a bag of chips. The rain was steady now, a soft roar all around, and the forest felt big, you know, like it was swallowing us up. Lena started doodling in the dirt with a stick, and Owen launched into some dumb story about a haunted cabin. I just listened, warming my hands, thinking this was my shot to chill out. We crashed early, rain tapping the tents like it was trying to talk. I fell asleep quick, lulled by the sound, figuring a little water never hurt anybody. Tacoma's got its own mess, sure, but out here, I felt free, stupidly free, looking back. The woods were quiet, save for that drip drip drip, and I didn't catch the weirdness creeping in. Should have known Mount Rainier wasn't going to play nice. That first night, I slept through the warning signs, little things, stuff you brush off till it's too late. But out there, in that rainy sprawl, something was already sizing us up. This was just the calm before the storm, literally. Morning rolled in, and I woke up to rain still slapping the tent like it owned the place. My sleeping bag was damp, figures, and my back felt like I'd slept on a rock, which I probably had. I unzipped the flap, and Mount Rainier was dishing out gloom. Mist hanging low, trees dripping, the whole soggy package. I groaned, already missing my dry Tacoma apartment, but I wasn't about to admit that yet. Owen was up, poking at the fire pit, trying to resurrect some embers. Rough night, huh, Theo? He said, chuckling like this was all a big laugh. I grumbled about needing coffee and shuffled out, boots squishing in the mud. Lena popped out next, hair a mess, glaring at the sky. "This is your idea of fun?" she said, half joking, half not. We scraped together breakfast, soggy granola bars, and cold instant coffee. Not exactly gourmet. Then the trouble kicked in. Owen noticed our cooler was busted, lid cracked, probably from the hike, and half our food was soaked or gone. "Raccoons, maybe," he said, but I wasn't buying it. Those claw marks looked too big. Lena freaked a little, saying we should bail, but Owen waved it off. "We've got enough to last," he insisted. I sided with him. Dumb move, thinking we could tough it out. Pride's a hell of a drug. We decided to hike anyway, explore a bit, maybe shake off the bad vibes. The rain was heavier now, turning the trail into a swamp. I kept slipping, cursing under my breath, while Owen marched ahead like he was born for this. Lena lagged, sketching quick outlines in her waterproof notebook, muttering about how the mist was inspiring. Me? I was just trying not to faceplant into a puddle. About an hour in, shit got weird. We stumbled on this old fire ring, abandoned, logs scattered, a torn sleeping bag caught in a bush. Sloppy campers, Owen said, kicking at it, but I didn't like the vibe. Too messy, too rushed. Then Lena spotted something. A knife, rusted, half buried in the dirt. "Who leaves that?" she asked, voice tight. My gut twisted. Something felt off, scary even, but I shrugged it off as nerves. We kept going, but the forest was closing in, branches snapping back, rain blurring everything. Owen stopped suddenly, pointing at the ground. Tracks, deep, wide, not bear, not human. "Elk?" he guessed, but his tone wasn't sure. I crouched, rain dripping off my hood, and traced one. Too long, too clawed. "Maybe." I lied, but that creepy feeling was growing, like we'd stepped into something we shouldn't have. Back at camp, the mood was sour. The fire wouldn't catch, our tents were sagging, and those tracks stuck with me. Lena kept glancing at the trees, pencil still, and Owen was quieter than usual, fiddling with his pocket knife. "Just the weather," I said, trying to lighten things, but it sounded hollow. The rain was a wall now, loud and thick, and I couldn't shake the sense we weren't alone. We ate what we could, some jerky and crackers, huddled under the tarp. Owen tried a story, something about a lost hiker, but it fizzled out fast. Lena sketched those tracks, her hand shaky, and I just stared into the woods, feeling watched. It was subtle, you know? Like when you're a kid and swear something's in the closet. I told myself it was nothing. But Mount Rainier had other ideas, and they were about to slap us upside the head with it. Night crashed down, and the rain turned brutal, hammering the tarp like it wanted to shred it. We were crammed underneath, damp and miserable, the fire long dead. Owen was sharpening a stick with his knife, all fidgety, while Lena clutched her sketchbook like a shield. I was trying to act chill, but my nerves were buzzing. Those tracks, that knife, the whole disturbing vibe was eating at me. Then I saw it, movement, just past the tarp's edge. Thought it was a shadow at first, some trick of the rain, but it shifted, slow and deliberate. Tall, hunched, way too thin, arms dangling like they didn't fit right. My stomach dropped, and I grabbed Owen's arm. "You seeing this?" I hissed. He froze, nodding. and Lena let out a tiny gasp, eyes wide. It was no animal, no hiker, just pure horror standing there. It stepped closer into the faint glow of our lantern. Skin like wet ash, stretched tight over bones, and a face. God, that face. No eyes, just black hollows, and a mouth full of sharp, crooked teeth. My heart slammed into overdrive, and I couldn't breathe right. What the hell is that? Lena whispered, voice breaking. Owen gripped his stick tighter, but it looked pathetic against whatever this was. That thing tilted its head, like it heard her, and let out this sound. Low, wet, like a growl mixed with a choke. My skin crawled, every hair standing up. "We need to move," Owen said, barely audible, and we scrambled, grabbing packs, tripping over each other. It didn't lunge, just watched, those hollows locked on us, like it was curious. That made it worse, somehow. We ran, blind in the rain, branches clawing at my face. I heard it behind us, not fast, not yet, just keeping pace, that awful sound cutting through the storm. My boots slipped, mud sucking me down, and I nearly lost Lena. She stumbled, sketchbook flying into the dark. Owen yanked her up, yelling at me to keep going, his voice raw with panic. We hit a drop, steep, rocky, slick as hell. "Down!" Owen shouted, and we slid, half falling, rocks banging my shins. I heard it above us, pacing the edge, that growl getting louder, angrier. My mind was a mess, flashing to that sleeping bag, those tracks. This thing owned these woods, and we were trespassing big time. Lena sobbed, clutching her arm, and I knew we were in deep, scary shit. We landed in a gully, soaked and bruised, and ducked under an overhang, panting like dogs. It was up there still, peering down, those teeth glinting, rain streaming off it like it was part of the storm. Owen whispered, "What do we do, Theo?" But I had nothing, just terror, pure and simple. It didn't move, just stared, and I felt pinned, like a bug under glass. The rain hit us, maybe, but I could hear it shifting, claws scraping rock. My brain screamed to run, but my legs wouldn't budge. Lena was shaking, Owen's stick trembling in his hands, and I realized this wasn't some random encounter. This thing wanted us here, trapped in its rainy hell. It growled again, louder, and I knew we'd just stepped into the deep end of something we couldn't swim out of. The night was young, and it wasn't done playing. We were stuck in that gully, rain pounding us like a fist, that thing looming up top with its hollow eyes and jagged teeth. My heart was racing so fast I thought it'd explode, and I could barely hear Owen whispering over the storm. "We can't stay," he said, voice shaky, and he was right. That growl was getting closer, like it was done waiting. We bolted, scrambling out from under the overhang, pure terror pushing us. The ground was a mess, mud sliding under my boots, rocks tripping me up. Lena was right behind, gasping, her arm banged up from the fall, and Owen took the lead, stick in hand like it'd do jack squat. I heard it move, fast now, crashing down the slope after us. That wet, choking sound was everywhere, and I knew we were in a life-or-death sprint. My lungs burned, but I didn't stop, couldn't stop. We zigzagged through the trees, rain blinding me, branches snapping in my face. I slipped, went down hard, and felt something cold brush my leg, those claws grazing me. I yelled, kicked free, and Owen hauled me up, his eyes wild. "Go, Theo," he shouted, and we ran, Lena stumbling beside me. That thing was relentless, tearing through the woods like it owned them, which, yeah, it probably did. We hit a creek, shallow but fast, swollen from the rain. "Cross it," I yelled, wading in, water icy up to my knees. It tugged at me, nearly knocked me over, but I grabbed Lena's hand, pulling her through. Owen splashed behind, slipping once, and I saw it reach the bank. Hesitating, maybe scared of the current. My chest heaved, hope flickering, and we made it to the other side, collapsing in the mud, soaked and shaking. I peeked back. Nothing, just rain and shadows. Did we lose it? Lena panted, clutching her arm. Owen shook his head, scanning the trees. "Keep moving." He was right. This wasn't over. We staggered up, legs like lead, and pushed on. No clue where we were. My hands were bloody, my jeans torn, but I didn't care. Getting away from that horror was all that mattered. The forest was endless, a wet, green maze closing in. My mind kept replaying those teeth, that growl, straight out of some scary nightmare I couldn't wake up from. We hiked for hours, maybe, rain never letting up, jumping at every noise. Owen kept us going, muttering about the trailhead, but I wasn't sure he knew anymore. Lena was quiet, too quiet, and I felt the weight of this mess sinking in. Then lights. Dim, flickering through the trees. Road, I croaked, adrenaline spiking. We stumbled toward it, breaking through brush, and hit gravel. A service road, slick and empty. No van, no people, just tire ruts fading into the muck. We'd escaped, maybe, but we were still lost as hell, and I couldn't shake the feeling those claws were still out there, waiting. We followed the road, hobbling along, rain blurring everything. My phone was dead, Lena's too, and Owen's was long gone. Every shadow had me flinching, every gust sounding like that growl. We were alive, barely, but Mount Rainier wasn't done with us. Not by a long shot. I kept telling myself the creek stopped it, that we'd made it, but deep down, I knew better. That thing was patient, and we were still in its playground, running on borrowed time. We limped down that gravel road, rain beating us down like it wanted us gone. My whole body ached, cuts stinging, legs wobbling, and Lena was barely holding it together, her arms swollen bad. Owen kept pushing, saying the van couldn't be far, but his voice was thin, stretched. I just wanted out of this rainy hell, back to Tacoma, dry and safe. Yeah, right, wishful thinking. We found the parking lot, our little slice of hope, and there was Owen's van, right where we'd left it. Relief hit me, until I got closer. Tires slashed, windows busted, hood crumpled like something huge had smashed it. What the fuck? Owen said, kicking the wreckage. My guts sank. This wasn't vandals. That thing had tracked us, trashed our way out. Lena started sobbing, and I felt the horror settle in deep. We walk, I said, throat tight. Find a ranger, anything. Owen nodded, but his eyes kept darting to the trees. We started down the road, sticking close, every step a slog. The rain hid everything, sounds, shapes, and I kept waiting for that growl to rip through. We'd made a deadly mistake, thinking we'd shaken it, thinking distance mattered to something like that. It came out of nowhere, bursting from the woods, right in front of us. Taller, uglier, dripping wet, those hollows locked on me. Owen swung his stick, brave and stupid, but it grabbed him, claws sinking into his chest. He screamed, blood spraying, and I shoved Lena back, yelling at her to run. She tripped, fell hard, and I froze. Worst call I ever made. That thing tossed Owen aside like trash, his body hitting the gravel with a wet crunch. Lena scrambled up, but it was on her fast, claws slashing, her scream cut short. I ran, legs pumping, tears mixing with the rain. I heard it behind me, that growl, those teeth snapping, but I didn't look, just kept going, coward that I am, till I hit pavement, real road, headlights flashing. A truck screeched to a stop, some guy yelling at me, pulling me in. I babbled about monsters, my friends, blood everywhere, and he floored it, radioing for help. Rangers found me later, half dead, ranting like a lunatic. They searched, found Owen's body, torn up, but no Lena, just her sketchbook in the mud, pages smeared red. They called it a bear attack, but I know what I saw. Those hollows, that mouth. Back in Tacoma now, I don't sleep. Every raindrop's a reminder, every shadow a threat. That thing's still out there, in Mount Rainier, waiting for the next dumbass to wander in. I left my friends to die, and it let me go. Maybe to suffer, maybe to warn. Either way, it's a tragedy I can't shake, and I'm done with the woods for good. This ain't just a story, it's a scar, and it's all I've got left.